The action-packed JCC transfer exam ended with Sakamoto defeating Shania, who was revealed to be hired by Kashima and X and controlled by Gaku. With the test officially over, only 7 out of the 360 applicants passed, including Shin and Sakamoto, whose only aim is to gather information about X. However, with Torimaru and Mafuyu captured by X and his team, how will the school year unfold? Let's find out. In the next scene, Kanaguri continued shooting a movie, narrating that after the conclusion of the ferocious battle, their hero's test was over, but he was suddenly abducted by a mysterious enemy, so he wondered how the boy would react to this devastating situation. He pointed the camera at Mafuyu, who commented that he should drop dead, so he immediately cut the shoot and said it was too banal, and it turned out to be their 38th take, so he promptly started take 39, telling everyone to stand by. It appears they had arrived at X's base, where X asked him if he could wrap it up. Kashima pointed out that this wasn't the JAA, so he should show some consideration, and Carolina Reaper snapped his tongue and asked how many takes he needed, calling Kanaguri a loser, to which Kanaguri commented that they should be quiet on the set and that extras should remain silent. Because of what he said, Carolina Reaper rushed at him and tried to kick him, but he easily blocked it with his clapboard. And here we see Carolina Reaper's irritated face as he says not to make them part of Kanaguri's idiotic hobby, to which Kanaguri retorted that his movie was a far more sacred use of time than Carolina Reaper's pathetic life. Suddenly, a man commented on the side, whose eyebrows, instead of being 2 straight hairs, had sweet tooth written on both eyebrows, and he said they shouldn't fight there, calling Carolina Reaper Big Brother, which made him turn to look at him, and it turns out this man's name is Club Jam. And he added that if he wanted to hurt someone, he should hurt him, and he thought they could solve all of this if Kanaguri filmed him being brutally tortured while everyone watched, to which Carolina Reaper angrily replied that he just wanted to be tortured there, and he would punish him, ordering him not to breathe until he said so. Kanaguri said he didn't want to make tasteless movies, and Kashima commented on the side that it sounded like they were herding cats there. While this was happening, Gaku was just playing on a handheld console, while Torimaru and Mafuyu both pondered with blank expressions what's with these freaks. X spoke here and called out to Torimaru and Mafuyu, saying he imagined they felt inconvenienced by being brought there suddenly, but they shouldn't be afraid because they didn't intend to hurt them. Mafuyu sarcastically replied, "Oh sure, especially after how they had been treated by them." Kashima explained that their organization had come together to achieve a certain goal, and right now they were recruiting young, promising assassins to gather strength, which was why Torimaru and Mafuyu were there. And while he was speaking, Club Jam just covered his mouth. Torimaru wondered about the meaning of their certain goal, so X pointed out that the goal was to crush the JAA. This caught Mafuyu's attention, and he asked why, so X thought for a moment and said that simply put, to return the world to its natural order, and that it was for the sake of sacred justice, which made Mafuyu wonder while Club Jam still covered his mouth. Kashima added that they also offered a generous benefit package, including 2 days off per week, no overtime, and guaranteed lifetime employment. Mafuyu asked what would happen if they refused, and as Kashima was about to answer this question, while they were staring at each other, Club Jam collapsed and started foaming at the mouth, and he began to shake because he had run out of breath, which left Kashima and the others just staring dumbfounded, and Carolina Reaper said, "Oops," because he had forgotten about him and told him he could breathe again. On the other side in a part of the city, Shishiba was walking with Osaragi and Nagumo, and he commented that he was fed up and that the job sucked, asking why it seemed like they were the only ones getting all the assignments, and where that idiot Kanaguri was, to which Nagumo replied that he had probably left to shoot a movie somewhere, so Shishiba said that was blowing off work. Osaragi suggested they fire him from the job, which Shishiba also wanted to do, and he asked why their boss had hired that jerk in the first place, so Nagumo explained that he had heard Kanaguri had been involved in a big fight with an order member once because of a movie, and he had killed his opponent, then swapped positions with the person he had killed, which made Shishiba comment that it seemed nothing's ever in order. As they were walking, they came across a moving lotto cart stationery at one side of the street, and here Nagumo bought 3 killer lotto scratch cards from the vendor, who said they cost 900 yen. After getting the tickets, he gave one each to Shishiba and Osaragi, saying that if they won, half of it would be his. While scratching the ticket, Shishiba wished that Nagumo would stop repeating that joke because those tickets never won, while Osaragi asked him for a 5 yen coin to scratch her ticket, to which he just yelled at her to use her fingernail. Nagumo then said not to be too cynical, and after revealing all the pictures on his ticket, he showed it to them and explained that the meanings of those pictures were Kyoto, assassin killings break out, and there was an X symbol seen at the crime sites, so he thought perhaps Slur's organization was implicated in this. He told Shishiba and the others that they should investigate it, to which Shishiba commented that it was another Slur story, and he was irritated because he noticed it was his hometown and it seemed Slur really aimed to destroy the JAA. Osaragi asked what would happen if the JAA fell, and if they would become unemployed if that happened, to which Shishiba said something worse would occur, and Nagumo added that it would be the end of Japan, and Shishiba continued that their country would be flooded with criminals. So Osaragi asked again about the police, to which Nagumo replied that the Japanese police only solve about 30% of crimes, and that's only for the crimes they know about, so they probably only catch 10%, if that. Osaragi's brain began to short-circuit while calculating this, and she asked if he meant they were killing the other 90, to which Shishiba said, well, they don't just kill criminals but whoever they're hired to kill. So Osaragi thought that was cool because she was one of the good guys, but she quickly said, oh, when Nagumo explained that it wasn't accurate either, and in his opinion, there was no good or evil when it came to killing, which made Shishiba stare at him, and he added that if they were to ask him, an overzealous sense of justice was worse than evil. While he was explaining, Osaragi noticed something that made them wonder, and it turned out she had won on the lotto scratch ticket, which surprised Shishiba as he realized there really were winning cards, and he had thought those were just instructions, while Nagumo happily said wasn't he right and also asked how much Osaragi had won, to which she replied 20,000 yen. Because of that, Nagumo said she should take care of their lunch, so Osaragi said no because she was the one who bought that ticket, to which Shishiba disagreed and said he saw Nagumo buy it. On the other hand, inside Sakamoto's convenience store, Shin was telling Heisuki and Lu about what happened in the exam he and Sakamoto took, to which Lu said in amazement that the test seemed very difficult, but Heisuki added that they did well there. So way to go, while Shin was saying they didn't expect Slur to be involved in it, and Sakamoto thought it would just be a regular old test. Heisuki said that the JCC was fun and had many events, and Pisuki agreed. But Shin told him to listen and said they weren't going there to have fun, and their goal was to access the JCC database and the whole point was to gather intel on Slur. If that's the case, they might as well make friends there, Lu said. So Shin remembered that he did make a friend while they were taking the test. Hana arrived and happily said there was a letter for Shin and Sakamoto, and it came from the JCC. As Shin was opening the letter, Heisuki asked what had arrived, and Shin noticed they were their test scores. When Shin and the others peeked at his letter, the three of them including Lu were shocked, and it turned out they were shocked because Shin had placed first in the test scores and received an A+ rating. Heisuki shouted in amazement because he was first out of 352, and that was impressive, and the transfer test was also super high level, while Lu said, not bad, and Hana cheered for him. In Shin's mind, while he was still stoked, it seemed he was getting better little by little. Lu then realized that this meant test scores had also arrived for Sakamoto, so they turned to look at him. In contrast to Shin, who aced their test, it turned out that Sakamoto had failed it, and he dejectedly said so, which shocked all of them in a bad way, and they shouted, what? Shin and the others asked if Sakamoto had forgotten to write his name or something, and Lu commented that even professionals sometimes fail, while Hana felt sorry for her daddy. Irritated, Shin stated that there must be a mistake there, and there's no way Sakamoto could have failed, so he said he would look into why this happened, causing Aoi and the others to be taken aback by Shin's anger. Shin called Usami to discuss the matter, but Usami only apologized and said it was due to their regulations, so Shin angrily asked why they had told Sakamoto he passed the test, to which Usami replied that they got caught up in the moment, but actually, it was clearly stated in the JCC regulations that they couldn't admit anyone with a bounty on their head. Shin hung up on him while he was still talking and said that was a bunch of bull, deciding then and there that he would go there to talk to them in person, which amazed Lu and the others because Shin was really angry, while Nagumo said not to worry because there was an easy solution. Sakamoto and the others turned to look at Nagumo and were stunned, and soon after they shouted asking where he came from, To which Nagumo replied that he heard Sakamoto had taken the JCC test again, and he was about to comment on how stupid Sakamoto was, but didn't finish the thought and just said he meant it was interesting. Sakamoto noticed that Nagumo almost called him stupid, so he got annoyed, but Shin stopped him and calmed him down, then asked Nagumo what he meant by an easy solution. So Nagumo said it was simple because if he couldn't enter as a student, what about as a teacher? Shin was surprised by his suggestion and said, "Huh?" And Sakamoto asked if he was referring to a teaching internship, to which Nagumo explained that he had recently researched because he wanted to infiltrate the JCC, but it coincided with a trip to Kyoto with some friends, so he was hoping to find a replacement for himself. Shin thought it was a good idea, and in that way, he could observe the JCC as a student while Sakamoto could do the same as a teacher, but there was a catch. Sakamoto pointed out that their issue was that the JCC wouldn't let him in, and he called Nagumo stupid, to which Nagumo smiled and commented that there was no problem because Mr. Sakamoto didn't need to go there, and he turned to Aoi, which surprised her. Aoi stared at him and asked if he wanted her to be the undercover teacher there. In the next scene, we went to the JCC, and it was explained to us that the Japan Clear Creation is a Japanese assassin training institution. The JCC reportedly has an enrollment of almost 1,000 students and a 4-year residential program. Due to its extreme training regimen, many students do not survive, but students who excel may achieve licensure during their training. In other words, the JCC is Japan's preeminent assassin training program. After that, we saw Akira here, who as usual was nervous and thinking about how big this place was and that she was lost. A man picking up trash saw her here, so she turned to look at him, and when he asked if she was unarmed and said that if she was training to be an assassin, she should always carry a weapon, she just shouted sorry and ran away quickly. While experiencing JCC school life, she explained here that a week had passed since their class started, but she still hadn't met anyone who had taken the test with her. She walked down a hallway and thought to herself how lonely it was, and suddenly she heard someone behind her shouting to make way, and they seemed to be in a hurry, and when she turned to look, she saw 2 men pushing a stretcher with another man who was bleeding on it. Others who saw this commented that it was the 10th one this month to be injured in the assassin practicum, and someone added that this one looked really bad, and that people who couldn't keep up wouldn't last long there. So when Akira heard this, she seemed to lose her soul from fear. While remembering Sakamoto and Shin, she said in her mind that it was truly a miracle that she passed, and she said goodbye to them because she might not be able to handle this. She also remembered the time when her Aunt Ryan asked if she could tell her something cool, and started to explain that some people say tears change taste depending on what emotion you're feeling, like happy tears taste sweet, and asked, "Isn't that disgusting?" Her courage returned a little here, and she told herself that she came to this world to find Ryan, so she needed to become an assassin. Suddenly, their school bell rang, startling her, and she immediately looked for her next period, seeing on the paper she was holding that close quarters combat was in Lecture Hall 3. She peeked into one of the rooms, but when she looked inside, she saw some scientists, and the teacher there asked if she was a first year, stating that only third years were allowed to take poisoning classes, which left her speechless. We then moved to Lecture Hall 3, where the professor was beginning to teach about the art of close quarters combat, explaining that it was fundamental for an assassin, and pointing out to his students that they would learn close quarters combat skills for actual combat, not just for sport. He had them open their textbooks to page 3 and explained that during an assignment, the enemy's eyes are always on them, and their time is limited. So their basic task is to inflict a mortal wound using minimal effort and minimal mess. While the professor was teaching, Akira slowly entered and was somewhat relieved that she had made it in time. Now, the professor said he would call 2 of them to try it out, and he called Tanishi, student number 13, and as he was about to call another, he suddenly shot at Akira, who was slowly walking in the back, saying she would be the next one he was calling. The professor pointed out that this wasn't a class for sneaking. Akira managed to dodge the bullet, but she was on the verge of tears, thinking she was dead as she remembered the bleeding man she had seen earlier. As Akira descended to the center, their professor explained that they would now start with the basic movements of close quarters combat, and they should try to evade attacks by redirecting the focus of their opponent's strike, adding that they should start slowly. Akira was stunned by the size of her opponent, while the man, named Jumbo Tanishi, irritatedly thought about whether he really had to face such a tiny opponent, and he became even more annoyed when his friends on the side teasingly told him not to lose. Their professor said they would take turns on offense and defense, and they would use real knives, so they should start slowly. As the professor handed Tanishi the knife, he thought about giving Akira a little scare, and while preparing to attack, he suddenly sped up his knife thrust towards Akira, causing his professor to shout that he had just said to go slowly. However, to Tanishi's surprise, Akira easily deflected his striking hand, and the seriousness in Akira's eyes was visible, which made the man nervous. Suddenly, a woman who looked like a teacher appeared behind Akira and quickly delivered 2 strikes to the neck and chin of the man Akira was facing, instantly knocking him unconscious, which made the students gasp in surprise. Akira turned to look at the person who did that and thought that she recognized that movement style. The professor then spoke and said he had forgotten to mention that starting that day, they would have a teaching intern to help them. After that, we suddenly went back to the time when Nagumo and the others were finding a way for Sakamoto to also enter the JCC, and here he used his doppelganger skill on Sakamoto to change his appearance. Their companions shouted in amazement, saying that Sakamoto's appearance had really changed. When Sakamoto looked at his appearance in the mirror, he started to sweat and become weirded out, while Aoi was wowing at his appearance, saying he really looked like a different person now. Extremely annoyed, Sakamoto told Nagumo to return him to his original appearance, which Nagumo didn't do, and instead just noticed the time and said he needed to leave. But before leaving, he informed them that the disguise would only last for 24 hours, so Sakamoto should find the database before it ran out, and he wished him good luck. We then returned to the present, and it turns out that the reason Sakamoto was annoyed was because Nagumo had disguised him as his wife, Aoi, and here he irritatedly thought that he would get back at that man someday. We returned again to a point in time where Sakamoto and the others were still talking inside his convenience store, and here, Lu commented that she had been thinking about this for a long time, but wasn't the JCC just a school, so why would it have intel about slur? Sakamoto explained that the JCC's database contained detailed records of the school and all its students from past to present. It reportedly listed basic information such as age, gender, body type, as well as weapon of choice, martial arts specialty, and post-graduation activities. So if you managed to get a peek at it, any student would be as good as naked apparently, which made Shin speechless at his use of the word apparently. That was the urban legend among students, Sakamoto said, and Heisuki commented that he remembered that and asked if it was correct that there was a secret room that was either in the main library or in the vice principal's office, to which Sakamoto added that in his time, there were rumors about a mysterious room under the southern stairs, which made Lu speechless and comment that they only had rumors, and Heisuki agreed, saying that no one had ever found that room. Sakamoto added that a while back during exams, Ryan and Nagumo looked for the room to get test answers from past years, but they didn't find it in the end, and he was also annoyed because, for some reason, he got involved with them. Shin asked how they were supposed to find that room if even Sakamoto couldn't find it. So Sakamoto pointed out that they now had Shin, which confused him, and Lu agreed, saying that nothing could be hidden from Shin. Sakamoto would look into the rumors, and Shin would read the minds of teachers and students, to which Shin replied that he understood. After that, we returned to the present where Sakamoto was disguised as Aoi, and when Akira saw this, she was amazed and commented in her mind that there was actually someone as strong as Ryan. The students in the classroom cheered, saying how cool and cute this Aoi was. However, since this was actually Sakamoto and not Aoi, he glared at them angrily and frighteningly with fierce eyes, and while staring, he said in his mind that he had memorized all the dirty faces of the people who had defiled his wife with their lustful eyes. Because of this, the students broke out in a cold sweat and whispered that she was scary. Suddenly, Sakamoto's stomach expanded, causing the button of his outfit to pop off and hit Akira in the head, but he quickly grabbed it and pushed it back into place. Sakamoto thought to himself that he had almost blown his cover, while those who saw what happened wondered what they had just witnessed. Akira asked if she and Sakamoto had met before, to which Sakamoto covered his face and replied that they hadn't, and while this was happening, their professor thought Akira looked familiar, so he looked at her papers, and when the professor saw that her last name was Akao, he suddenly fell to his knees and hugged himself in fear, quickly ordering Akira to return to her seat, which confused her. As Akira returned to her seat, the professor sat down in fear and thought that whenever he saw that last name, it brought back memories of Ryan Senpai beating him up. Akira commented to herself while returning to her seat that this school was so weird and she couldn't stand it anymore. In the next scene, we move to Akira's fourth period shooting practice, and here, their professor explained that first things first, if they couldn't handle a gun properly, they would never become hitmen, because any license involving being a hitman required a grade A or higher in firearm skill certification. For their class today, they would learn the mechanics of their guns and how to shoot. So now they would assemble their gun and shoot a target that was 100 meters away from them, and they only had 1 minute to do this. The students were shocked and thought it was impossible to do in 1 minute. So their professor added that they needed to do this quickly to get as many shots as possible, but if they didn't assemble it correctly, they could lose a finger if the gun accidentally misfired. After that, their professor pressed the timer, so they immediately sprang into action to start their activity, and their nervousness and difficulty in doing the task was evident. Some students were commenting that just assembling the gun in under a minute was already ridiculous, and another was struggling to fix their gun. Some managed to complete their activity, and after a quick minute, their professor stopped them. Their professor pointed out that some of them managed to fire a shot, but most of them didn't even finish assembling the gun, and the students' irritation was visible as one even clicked their tongue, and the professor commented that this class was hopeless. The professor called the disguised Sakamoto as trainee teacher and asked him to demonstrate to the students how it's done. Akira stared at Sakamoto, and the professor hurried Sakamoto along, revealing that he wanted Sakamoto to do this to embarrass him because he believed this wasn't a workplace for women. The professor prepared to start his timer, and the moment he said go, Sakamoto assembled the gun with incredible speed, and in an instant, he also managed to fire multiple bullets that hit the center of the targets. The professor was astonished and said that Sakamoto had fired 67 shots, while Sakamoto thought to himself that he had slowed down, and even the other students there were amazed because all of his shots were bullseyes. After that, some students there saw the all-time record of that activity, and there were apparently some famous names written on it, which caught Sakamoto's attention. Sakamoto approached the scoreboard and arrogantly thought that if it was all-time, he should be in first place. However, to his surprise, someone had surpassed him, and not just by 1 point over his previous 89 points, but by 7 points, with this person's score being 96. We also see here that the top scorer has not given his name. Sakamoto was speechless when he saw this, while others there commented that it was said the first place holder was a man named Dragoon, and they had heard he has a bird, and he was so strong that he had a tattoo of a bullseye on his forehead like a symbol saying "shoot me if you dare," and another added that no one knew what that man was doing after graduating, and now he had become a legend. Sakamoto became even more speechless when he remembered what Heisuki had said about forgetting to write his name on the test, and here he realized that Heisuki was the first place holder in the all-time record, and he painfully accepted that it was amazing. In the next scene, we went to the South Building at the Weapons Production Department Research Laboratory, and here, a man was shouting because he was looking for who had melted his weapon for raw materials, where others also got angry and said the same thing had happened to their materials, so they thought that maybe the man named Natsuki was responsible for it. A man holding a wrench said he didn't care if that guy was top of the class, and he wouldn't let him act all high and mighty in the lab. They started looking for Natsuki in their area, and we suddenly moved to a man using his cell phone inside a cubicle, commenting that it was crap because their senpai was pissed off, and it was such a hassle. The man holding the wrench entered the restroom and started shouting where this Natsuki was, asking if he was here, and he began opening the cubicles one by one, while the man using his cell phone commented that it was scary. Soon after, when the man opened another cubicle, he saw Shin inside, reading manga while smoking, and the man asked who he was and said he had never seen him before, so Shin stared at him. Shin gasped here as if he realized something, and said this might be what he had seen, and he started skimming through the pages of what he was reading, and soon excitedly asked if this was the school trope where he would be harassed by his senpai. But by the way, he said, right now he was doing the skipping class to smoke in the bathroom trope, and he had been dreaming of doing this for a long time, which irritated the man, who suddenly grabbed him by the collar while saying if he keeps messing around, he would kill him. However, Shin was strong and didn't back down, so he quickly punched the man's face and followed it with a strike to the liver in an instant, and after that, he just threw him inside the cubicle and pointed out that this was where he should say, "Please let me go, Sanpai." And he happily said that he was feeling like a typical teenager here, and this was what it felt like to be in school. He wished that he could explore this school more, and according to the manga he was reading, the person sitting next to him would be the one to show him around the school. While he was talking, the man who was using his cell phone earlier suddenly came out of another cubicle and asked Shin if he was okay, calling him senpai. When Shin turned to look at him, extreme surprise was visible on his face, and when their eyes met, the man suddenly became invisible. So Shin quickly grabbed this man and shouted at him not to move and that he wouldn't be able to escape from him. Irritated, Shin asked what this invisible freak was doing in that place, and it turns out that it was Seiba he had seen, and Seiba thought, "Damn telepath," and commented that he thought Shin had mistaken him for someone else, and Seiba was introduced to us here as the weapons production department leader of JCC, and he was a first-year researcher there. Shin commented on how quickly he pinned down Seiba, and while pinning him down, he ordered him to tell him his information about X, to which Seiba asked if he meant the lab gig, pointing out that it was just a freelance job, so he didn't know anything about it, and Shin confirmed that he wasn't lying when he read his mind. After Shin released him, Seiba remembered something and quickly put on his hoodie, which surprised Shin, and he explained that the hood blocked electromagnetic waves so Shin couldn't read his mind anymore, which Shin tried and was shocked to find was true. Shin just scratched his head because he was going to ask him about the database, which caught Seiba's attention, and he asked the database and said, "Oh." So Shin also asked why he reacted that way and if he knew something about it. Seiba replied gosh and said he didn't know, and his shoulder hurt from his attack and it was hard to remember, which irritated Shin, to whom he just smiled. Afterwards, Seiba said he was hungry, so he decided to go to the cafeteria, while Shin shouted in anger. In the next scene, there was a student trying to hit a target using a practice pistol, and his companion was rushing him, so he told him to be quiet. This man shouted that he was sick and tired of the JCC bowl, and when he pulled the trigger of the gun, it made a beeping sound, and it hit the menu slab he was targeting, hitting the tag that said JCC bowl, and when he hit it, a receipt came out of the vending machine next to him, which said this was his receipt for that order. It turns out this was a challenging menu board where you need to hit the dish you want to order it, and it required high accuracy to hit other items on the menu besides the large JCC bowl tags. The man shouted that he got the JCC bowl again in what seemed like a regretful manner, so Shin turned to look and asked what was wrong with him, while Seiba was thinking about what he should order there. It was also shown to us here that the JCC bowl contained brown rice, army rations, and vegetable scraps of the day. Shin inserted a coin into the slot next to him, and he also tried to order there, and due to his accuracy, he just briefly targeted what he wants and quickly hit the steak lunch. He raised the receipt he got while shouting easy peasy, and the other students were amazed at his skill, and they couldn't believe that a first year had done that, and someone even said he hadn't eaten meat in months, while others were saying that Shin just got lucky. Shin inserted another coin into the slot machine, and arrogantly told Seiba that he would treat him but only for the money, and he needed to hit the target by himself. However, to Shin's surprise, Seiba used his invisibility jacket and approached the menu target, and shot the meal he wanted point blank, which made the other students there shout that he was a cheater. In the next scene, while eating, Seiba explained that maybe the database was in the teacher's room or library, or maybe not because he didn't know and it was just something like that. Because of his answer, Shin got annoyed with him and grabbed his collar while angrily saying that he bought him lunch even though he had no information, to which Seiba just thanked him for the food. Other students there saw them and even cheered Shin on, telling him to kill this Natsuki jerk. Seiba asked if Shin was a first year, so he irritatedly replied that he was a first year in the assassination department and added that Seiba asked if Mafuyu wasn't also a first year in the assassination department, to which Shin remembered and said they passed together. Seiba pointed out here that Mafuyu was his younger brother, which left Shin speechless, and he shouted if he was serious, and it made sense because they were both jerks, so Seiba asked if that was so. Shin also realized here that he hadn't seen the others who passed the test with him, so he wondered what had happened to them. Seiba just fell silent there and stared at him, But soon after he stood up and commented whatever, and if he wasn't going to school, he thought it was just as well right now. So Shin asked why he said that, and Saber replied that it was because JCC was a bit of a headache at the moment, which confused Shin. Afterwards, we moved to Sakamoto, who was very stressed with the amount of papers he was looking at and dealing with. The staff who saw him commented on how hardworking he was, and suddenly another staff member arrived carrying another enormous pile of papers for him to look at, which made him click his tongue in anger. While he continued skimming through these numerous documents, concern was visible on his face because he needed to find that database soon, as he remembered he only had 24 hours before he would return to his normal appearance. Suddenly, another staff member who looked like an older man with glasses called out to him. So he turned to look, and in the next scene, they were talking about what he wanted him to do, which was to follow up on students who hadn't shown up to class. And the man explained that students these days were too sensitive, and they were always hiding in their dorms and such. Sakamoto said he understood, and the man added that he should use his youthful energy to open the hearts of those students. After that, he started walking, and he thought this was his chance to investigate the library, and he even said nice because he could escape from desk work there. However, the person who spoke to him stopped him and pointed out that the way to the dorms was in the opposite direction, which made him fall silent. In the next scene, he arrived at a building that looked like student dormitories, and as he was entering, he commented in his mind that being a teacher was extremely difficult. And here it was also shown to us that there were only 15 hours and 20 minutes left until Sakamoto would return to his normal form. There were students observing him while in the shadows, and they asked who this woman was, and if she was new, to which others said that perhaps she had come to give them another lecture, and one said they just needed to teach her their dorm rules. As soon as Sakamoto entered the dorm, the floor he stepped on creaked, and the appearance of the place caught his attention because it turned out there were writings and postings on the walls, floor, and ceiling of drawn letter X's. While he was staring at this, two students suddenly jumped out from behind him holding blades, but using only his ball pen and notebook, he easily stopped their deadly stabs, which surprised the two. He turned to look at them and asked what was wrong with these kids. 3 more students charged at him, and while one of them was running with a kettle containing boiling water, he shouted that they had nothing to say to him, and called him an old bag while throwing the boiling water at him and telling him to leave. As the water was approaching him, he picked up the cup noodles that was beside him while asking, "Is that so?" And using this cup noodles, he caught all the water that the student threw, but several more students immediately charged at him. After catching all the water, Sakamoto put down the cup noodles where he got it from, and said he could see that they needed schooling. While the students were charging, they called him a stupid teacher, and he picked up the chopsticks that came with those cup noodles, and after separating them, he used them as throwing weapons, and after throwing them, he managed to pin one of the students to the wall. He seemed to have also engaged in a leapfrog-like maneuver when he grabbed the head of a charging student in front of him to use it as leverage and dodge using the wall beside him. He approached a clothesline and quickly grabbed 2 hangers, and using these hangers, he deflected all the bullets sent at him by 2 more students here, and using the same hangers, he pulled the 2 students as if he was going to hang them up. He jumped high and drilled these 2 into the ceiling support, which left the 2 hanging. One of them shouted at him to let them down, and that their clothes were being stretched out there, and even called him a jerk. 2 more students continued to charge at him while shouting who did he think he was, and using a drawer beside him. As one of the students got close to him, Sakamoto quickly ducked and forcefully pulled the drawer that solidly hit the side of this student. Another student jumped and tried to stab him from behind, but this student was surprised when he easily disarmed and controlled him to tuck his body. Sakamoto turned this student into a contortionist when he stuffed him into the drawer he had opened, and after putting him in there, he forcefully kicked the drawer to close it. There were still 2 students in front of him, but they stepped back when they saw his strength, but before they could escape. Sakamoto found a vacuum cleaner, and using this vacuum, he reached one student. Using the suction power of this vacuum, he dragged the student across the wall, and he slammed him on the floor, which broke the wood there. After he had taken down most of the students in this dorm, he seriously said not to deface the walls of someone else's alma mater while picking up the cup noodles he had set aside. Sakamoto ate these noodles, but he noticed that they weren't cooked enough, so he immediately turned his attention back to the students who had stopped in fear and thought about what he should ask them first. When he asked that, the students he had taken down stared at him, and we suddenly transitioned to a scene where they opened a bottle of sparkling drink, and it turned out they all sat down on the floor and started having a food trip while talking. A student poured a drink for Sakamoto here, while others were saying what a tough sensei he was, and they were even asking if he was on the top assassin ranking list and what kind of gun he used. While drinking, Sakamoto thought about how they ended up like this, and he remembered what the older male staff had told him about using the power of youth to open the hearts of these kids. One student there said he gave them chills because he wasn't like other teachers, and another was asking him what his major was before and what year he graduated, while others were making side comments about how cute he was. Sakamoto replied that it wasn't important anymore and that they should be in class and not cause trouble for their teachers. The students suddenly shouted that he had the wrong idea and that he should listen to them, and that the JCC was messed up now. One of them explained while showing Sakamoto a paper with an X mark that this symbol meant a lot to them, but the moment the teachers saw it, they got this weird look on their faces, and why did they suddenly fail them because they didn't understand why? Sakamoto stared at them for a moment and seriously asked if these kids knew what that symbol meant, to which one of them happily replied of course, and that it was the symbol of X, the assassin slayer, and it was the coolest thing in the assassin world at present, and the smiles of his classmates were also visible as they were saying they agreed with him, which left Sakamoto speechless and confused. The student added, "Wasn't it true that the most important thing in that industry was skill, and they all admired X?" And one said while reading an assassin newspaper that X's small team of killers had reduced the assassin population of Tokyo by 80%, and the JAA really sucked. Another student with glasses shouted that it wasn't that simple, and they didn't understand the significance of what X was doing. They should listen to this, and he explained that the worst crime of the JAA was that it had a monopoly on the assassin market, to which one of his classmates agreed and said it was a good point, and called him Hada. Hada continued his explanation and said that they couldn't work as an assassin in Japan unless they went through the JAA, and this JAA took 30% of everything assassins received from other companies, and if they refused to pay, they would be killed for disrupting the order, so it was extortion. His classmates agreed, and one of them said it was dangerous for an agency to choose who lives or dies, and another added that X was trying to change the assassin world. Plus, aside from all that crap, one said it was just really cool, and they all agreed to that, which confused Sakamoto even more and made him ask what was happening here. He commented in his mind that Slur was taking over the assassin world. Two students there argued where one told the one who said X was cool, calling him a Wakura, that he was brain dead and should think about it, to which a Wakura replied that he should shut up because cool is cool. Sakamoto thought for a moment here, and soon after, he told the students that they shouldn't be talking about violent things and that they should just enjoy school, which made the students fall silent and ask what that was and where that question came from, to which Sakamoto added that they would have special memories of these days. They should be looking for new friends and girlfriends and eating delicious food, and worry about the future later. Because of this, one student said and commented that he was a weird teacher and that he sounded like one of their uncles and whatever, which irritated him. However, one suddenly shouted that besides, all the girls at JCC were insane, to which one agreed and explained that it was like those majoring in poison, and one said that they were always looking for guinea pigs, which made Sakamoto smile. The students started chatting here about what he had said earlier, and one of them said that but he ate a lot in the cafeteria, to which another objected and called him a liar because he always only got the JCC bowl, so he told him to be quiet, while Sakamoto commented that that food was disgusting, so one of them asked if he had tasted it before. While they were talking, someone suddenly said hey to get their attention, and it turned out that a man with suspenders had arrived there, and he said they need to pipe down, and what did a stupid teacher want with them? Some students seemed to break out in a cold sweat of fear and called this man Amine, while Sakamoto's ears perked up at what he said, so they seriously stared at each other, Sakamoto and Amine. Amine warned his classmates not to be friendly with that teacher because she was just another JAA dog. He said that the time of the JAA was coming to an end, so these old folks needed to step back, and that whole group of jerks should just die, to which Sakamoto just stared at him. While this was happening, we moved to a highway where Shishiba was driving with Nagumo, and here Nagumo asked Shishiba if he thought Sakamoto was okay. So Shishiba also asked why and what he was doing, to which Nagumo said he was doing a teaching internship as a hot babe. Shishiba said that he was talking about their school, and he said he didn't have any good memories of that place, to which Nagumo said that he enjoyed it when they were still at JCC, and asked Shishiba if it's true that he went to the Kansai Assassin Institute, to which Shishiba agreed but said he dropped out. After that, Nagumo mentioned that many of the order members graduated from JCC, and Shishiba agreed, and that was the reason why he felt like an outsider. And if they thought about it, Osaraji didn't go to any assassin school, and he asked if it was correct that her family were farmers out in the country. However, when they both looked at the back seat, they didn't see Osaraji there, so they stared at it. And we moved to Osaraji, where it turned out they had left her at a convenience store. Shishiba remembered that she was sleeping when they got out of the car, and when they returned there, Osaraji had already come out. Shishiba was speechless here and seriously asked if Nagumo hadn't noticed it, to which Nagumo calmed him down because he thought she was just sleeping in the back seat. But Shishiba didn't accept that and pointed a gun at his head while saying he would really kill him. Nagumo said it was okay and they would just apologize to Osaraji later, and added that Osaraji was the type to hold grudges, so he should remember that it was Shishiba's fault too. While they were talking, there was a black van in front of them, and two men with guns leaned out of it, pointing their guns at them and starting to rain down bullets. Shishiba and Nagumo weren't hit, and Shishiba was nonchalantly irritated because this was just a rental car, to which Nagumo said it was okay because he signed up for full coverage insurance, zero deductible, and Shishiba made a side comment that that's killer rental service for cars. One of the men who tried to shoot them said that the order had taken the bait, and their decision to stake out on the freeway instead of the bullet train was correct. This man went back inside and cocked his gun while asking if it was really the order they were shooting at, to which his bald driver with glasses replied that that was what Yatsumura said. So it should be true, and we can also see here that their collars have X marks, so we can assume these are Slur's goons. Another one of their companions there said not to let their guard down because if they did, they would surely be killed. The driver looked in the side mirror and saw Nagumo standing on the roof of their car, so he asked what he was doing. On the order side, Shishiba told Nagumo not to be too flashy, to which Nagumo said not to worry because he had a gold assassin license. The driver goon of Slur ordered his companion to shoot Nagumo, which he immediately tried to do. But when he leaned out the window, he was puzzled that Nagumo had disappeared from the roof of their car. While X's goons were talking inside their van about one of them shooting while another covered him, Nagumo had already killed their companion and quickly entered their vehicle, so all three of them turned to look. In an instant, Nagumo rapidly stabbed these three using his knife skills, and he was so fast that they couldn't react. Afterwards, Nagumo used the tail light of the van he was riding to make a Morse code, and Shishiba read that his signal there was killing, so he commented that he noticed that even without him saying it. While driving, Shishiba looked at his side mirror, and he saw three black cars quickly following them, so he asked if they had more enemies there. Shishiba's car was flanked by one of the enemy vehicles, and one of its occupants began raining bullets upon them. However, using his exceptional skills and a hammer, Shishiba easily deflected all the bullets, commenting that the situation was becoming increasingly annoying. He swung his hammer at the man shooting at him, pulling him out of the moving car, which caused the man to yell at Shishiba to let him go, to which Shishiba simply replied for him to come closer. He wedged the man's clothes and the hammer in his car window, leaving the man dangling from the side, and told him that he would now serve as a shield. With the man hanging from his window, the enemy's allies couldn't shoot at Shishiba, and he remarked that the man also functioned quite well as a sunshade. He swerved his car to collide with the vehicle on his left, sandwiching the man hanging from the window while causing the enemy car to lose balance and flip over, resulting in an explosion. Another enemy car pulled up beside him, this time on the right side, and its occupant shouted that Shishiba should die. Shishiba prepared to use his hammer when suddenly he asked if his opponent enjoyed the feeling of being up high, and at that moment, someone stabbed the man trying to shoot Shishiba from above, piercing his arm. It turned out to be Nagumo, who had managed to jump onto the roof of the enemy car, and he happily exclaimed how good the air felt up there while the man he stabbed cried out in pain. The stabbed man's companion peeked out and saw Nagumo on the roof, yelling at the others to shoot him. However, Nagumo controlled the car's steering while using a stick he had inserted, causing their driving to become erratic and leading to collisions with two other cars behind them, while the GPS in the cars went haywire, repeatedly notifying that they were rerouting. Soon after, the car Nagumo controlled crashed into some traffic cones, causing it to flip over, while Nagumo jumped back into Shishiba's car. Upon Nagumo's return, he shouted, "I'm back," and Shishiba noticed his changed appearance, asking why he was making such a face, to which Nagumo replied that he was a bit carsick, catching Shishiba's attention as he worried Nagumo might vomit in his car. Nagumo asked if he could recline his seat, to which Shishiba responded by suggesting that if Nagumo was carsick, perhaps he should drive instead. As Nagumo relaxed, Shishiba inquired about the identity of their attackers, and Nagumo pointed out that he had seen X symbols on their collars, but their style was too flashy for slur, to which Shishiba agreed, stating that it didn't quite fit. Suddenly, Shishiba noticed something ahead of them, a car carrier that had opened its ramp to prevent the cars from falling off. They also spotted a man wearing a black tuxedo and an unusual hat that appeared to be made of fabric, who pulled out a 3-section staff with a blade at the end, causing Nagumo and Shishiba's eyes to widen, as the man used it to attack them. The attack hit their windshield, forcing Shishiba and Nagumo to jump out of their car, which was destroyed in the process. As they leaped, the man kicked one of the cars on the carrier towards them, but Nagumo managed to dodge it and close in on the man while wielding his special Swiss Army knife weapon. The man swung his staff, destroying the supports of the carrier's second level, while Nagumo countered with a backhand stab, which the man managed to block. The second level of the carrier collapsed right above Nagumo, but fortunately, he managed to evade it. Suddenly, Shishiba appeared behind the man and swiftly attempted to strike him in the head with the sharp end of his hammer, but the man blocked it again with his staff. Shishiba's eyes widened at this, and as the man parried his attack, their eyes met, suggesting that Shishiba might recognize this man. They then noticed something rapidly falling towards them from the air, and soon it crashed onto one of the cars on the carrier, revealing itself to be Osaragi carrying snacks and her weapon, a cylindrical saw. Fear was visible on Shishiba's face when he saw Osaragi, who immediately called out to him while preparing her string to increase her attack range, and Osaragi asked why they had left her behind. Osaragi attempted to throw her weapon, and it crawled towards the man, but the man managed to deflect it again, causing it to fly far down the truck. It reached the cement but continued spinning its blade, effectively becoming an anchor that stopped the carrier and caused it to flip over. They all jumped off the truck, and as they leaped, the man commented that it was too much to handle 3 active members of the order simultaneously, and he landed on the roof of a car. As it drove away from Nagumo and the others, he stared at them, and they stared back at him, while the carrier's driver worried about what to do in this situation. Afterwards, they talked among themselves, and Shishiba commented on how much Osaragi had bought, to which she replied that she thought she'd expense it. Nagumo then asked Osaragi if he could have some snacks, to which she angrily replied of course not, and she started to get angry and seriously asked why Shishiba had left her behind, causing Shishiba to nervously say that Nagumo had told them to leave, which made Nagumo shout that he was a liar. Shishiba quickly realized they were wasting time and asked if they really had time for this, to which Nagumo agreed, and Osaragi inquired about the identity of the man they had fought. Shishiba said that Osaragi probably haven't heard about that man before, and explained that the man was Mr. Yatsumura, their senpai, and a former member of the order who had been banished from the JAA. In the next scene, the 3 of them went to Kyoto, specifically to Arashiyama, where they boarded a boat, and Shishiba commented that he noticed it was unusual for JAA to send 3 order members here, and he knew this would be an intense assignment. Nagumo said that if their target was the former order member Yatsumura, it meant this would become an ordeal. It turns out they were on a boat with a hot pot, and Osaragi commented while getting food that it looked like a big assignment, to which Nagumo agreed and said they should do their best, while Shishiba asked if they were really taking the situation seriously. Osaragi urged them to quickly finish their mission so they could eat tofu, to which Nagumo happily said that sounded fun and he wanted to go to Shishiba's house, causing Shishiba to comment that they should just die. He told the 2 to listen to him and warned that if they weren't careful, they would die on this assignment. They encountered a vendor on a boat who offered them souvenirs, and Osaraji bought a yatsuhashi that the vendor said cost 2,500 yen, while Nagumo bought 3 boxes, causing Shishiba to angrily ask if people actually bought these things. Osaraji tasted what they bought and disappointedly said it was different from what she expected, while Nagumo also disappointedly said it was hard, to which Shishiba agreed and explained that they needed to ask for Nama Yatsuhashi if they wanted the soft kind, causing Nagumo to say that he had indeed asked for that. Nagumo also pointed out that Shishiba didn't need to be so grumpy and asked if he couldn't enjoy this excursion, to which Osaraji agreed and said he was being a downer, causing Shishiba to question when they started calling this an excursion. Nagumo happily said he thought he could guess why Shishiba was so glum, to which Shishiba irritatedly told him to be quiet, but because Osaraji was curious and Nagumo was stubborn, he said it was because Shishiba had to kill the senpai who had helped him get started, causing Shishiba to say with a poker face that he was wrong and call him a dumbass. Osaraji also asked if Mr. Yatsumura had been a close friend of Shishiba's, to which Shishiba said no and that it wasn't like that, explaining that when he first joined the order, Yatsumura always took him on missions, and he made a side comment that the Yatsuhashi Nagumo bought was indeed very hard when he bit into it. Nagumo pointed out that it was like them now with Osaraji and Shishiba, to which Osaraji pointed out that she wasn't a middle-aged man, causing Shishiba to make a side comment asking how he would be Yatsumura in this scenario, but Osaraji didn't answer and just asked again why Yatsumura had quit, irritating Shishiba, who told her not to ignore him. Nagumo answered Osaraji that Yatsumura had blown a big assignment, so JA got furious and ordered him to be killed. But Osaraji said he was still alive, to which Shishiba agreed, but explained that the assassin had screwed up, allowing Yatsumura to escape and vanish without a trace. This caused Nagumo to ask why Yatsumura would show himself now. After that, Shishiba commented that he actually kind of liked what they were eating, to which Nagumo responded with, "I know, right?" Suddenly, we transition to a room where Mr. Yatsumura is drinking alcohol while listening to a woman playing the shamisen, and here some men approached him and said they couldn't trust him. They said they did what he told them, and it resulted in the loss of 8 of their comrades, and asked why he didn't tell them how monstrous the order members were, to which Yatsumura just drank his alcohol. The man speaking also pointed out that all of them there held a grudge against JAA, and they resonated with X's doctrine, so if Yatsumura didn't agree with this, they were sorry but their paths would part here. Yatsumura took the bottle containing the alcohol and while pouring more into his sakazuki, he asked if holding a grudge was really a good motivation for an assassin, and explained that when JAA is destroyed, he would be able to walk under the sun again without worry, and that would surely be wonderful. Suddenly, one of the men kicked his small table that held his drink, and they pointed guns at him while saying they were revolutionaries, and it seemed Yatsumura lacked such passion. Yatsumura questioned their claim of being revolutionary assassins, calling them a joke. He told them to listen to him and pointed out that assassins are bland, with no taste and no smell, because they need to be invisible with their intent to kill. Immediately after Yatsumura said those things, he swung his 3-section staff, which easily sliced through the bodies of the 3 men in front of him. As his swing reached behind him, he also cut through the door behind him along with those outside who were associated with the men he was talking to. Their blood splattered around, and Yatsumura suddenly commented that he meant to cut another one too. It turns out he was talking to the woman playing the shamisen, who was also splattered with blood, and she just responded to what he said, stating that she wanted to have a red kimono, and thanked him, to which he just stared at her. Suddenly, blood dripped from the ceiling due to the splattered blood of the men, and it fell into the alcohol he was drinking, causing Yatsumura to comment that it had watered down his alcohol. The woman offered to give him a new one, which he declined and drank the blood-tainted alcohol anyway, saying he didn't want to waste it. After that, the scene shifted to Sakamoto while Amane was talking to him in the student dormitory at JCC, with Amane saying that all the people from JAA should just die because they were all terrible people. His classmates and even Sakamoto, who was still disguised as Aoi, just stared at him. One of his classmates explained that they had family in JAA, and another said that their older brother also worked there, while another asked if what he wanted wasn't too extreme, to which Amane stared at them and Sakamoto waited for Amane's reaction, But it didn't take long for Amane to realize and say that he hadn't been thoughtful, and he apologized. To which his classmates told us not to worry and that they knew he didn't mean it, and sometimes people do go overboard, while Sakamoto commented in his mind that his reaction was surprisingly sincere. Anyway, Sakamoto said he wanted all of them to show up for their afternoon classes, and if not, he would have to lecture them again. The students agreed with him, and one even said they wanted to attend his class, while Amane just started walking back to where he came from, but before he left, he turned around and said his friends could do what they wanted, but he wouldn't be ordered around by their teacher about what to do. Amane entered the room he came from, and his classmate wondered why he wasn't coming with them, while Sakamoto pondered this, causing a bald student to ask what the problem was. Sakamoto said to himself that Amane seemed familiar to him, or maybe he was just imagining it. When Amane entered his room, he apologized to the person he was talking to on a computer because he had been interrupted, and there was a weird teacher who showed up, to which his conversation partner replied that it wasn't a problem. It turns out he was talking to Kashima, who explained that as a student, school should be his main focus, and most things there are pretty insignificant compared to the things he could learn while still young. Amane asked if he did what Kashima was telling him, would he really be able to join the group, and Kashima agreed, saying they were in the process of recruiting fresh members, but they first needed to have him do a small initiation test. It turns out that the test Kashima was having him do was to destroy the database. The same database that Sakamoto and his team were looking for to get information on X. While this was happening, we went to Akira, who was crying while eating the JCC bowl, commenting that it was disgusting, but it would be rude not to finish it, and the person who cooked it cheered her on. We returned to the conversation between Kashima and Amane, where Kashima said that if Amane were to see the data of you-know-who, presumably referring to Slur, in the JCC database, it might be a tad inconvenient. Amane replied that this database seemed like an urban legend to them, to which Kashima commented that, well, they were right in saying where there's smoke, there's fire. After that, we moved to Shin and Seiba, where Shin was asking Seiba if he wasn't going to class, and it turns out they were both in the research laboratory, where Seiba was working on something, and Seiba replied that Research Institute students don't have many classes, which made Shin wonder what he meant by Research Institute student. Seiba explained that it was like a grad school program, and they were above undergrad students like Shin, causing Shin to comment and questioningly say that Seiba was his senpai then. Shin was fiddling with something that looked like a serum bottle while talking, so Seiba warned him not to tilt it too much because it might explode, which scared Shin and made him nervously say why didn't he say that earlier, and not to make such dangerous things, while Seiba was just wondering how much longer Shin would hang around that place. The man who was angry at Seiba because he suspected him of melting his weapon arrived and angrily asked Seiba about it, causing Seiba to go silent. He answered that it couldn't be helped and called the man senpai, to which the man irritatedly replied asking what he meant. So Seiba responded that, well, to create an alloy as pure as that, one would need skills as refined and sophisticated as his senpai's, and that he couldn't do what his senpai does. Due to Seiba's sugary comments, his senpai's anger dissipated and he put his arm around Seiba, saying he understood and that it probably couldn't be helped, and next time he should just talk to him and he'd understand, to which Seiba sarcastically replied really, and that he was so honored. Another student there talked to Shin and pointed out that Seiba always cons that man in that way. Another man heard this and said he understood and that if Seiba praised him, he'd probably forgive him, which confused Shin and made him ask what they were talking about, which in turn made them ask if Shin didn't know, and they explained that as an undergrad, Seiba had received the top graduation project of their class, and another added that he was the first weapons production department student in 15 years to win the coveted Yoshimura Prize, and that he was truly a genius. This made Shin speechless and he asked, Seiba? A genius? And another man there added that their school only awards the Yoshimura Prize to a few graduates each year from across the departments, and it's usually students from the assassin department, to which another man with glasses commented that but Seiba's invisibility suit was so high impact, and another said the teachers were so thrilled, and that's when Shin realized that Seiba himself had created that invisibility cloak. In the next scene, Seiba was throwing out trash and Shin accompanied him, and here he asked how long Shin was going to hang around their research lab, which confused Shin, and he added wasn't he looking for the database, to which Shin nervously replied that he knew that and not to pester him, and that there just weren't that many clues, but deep down he was starting to enjoy exploring the school. Seiba sighed and commented that the ability to find things is a true reflection of intelligence, which annoyed Shin and made him shout at Seiba to shut up. For starters, Seiba said, assuming that database really exists, what did Shin expect it to look like? Which caught Shin's attention and made him answer that it might be some sort of journal-like notebook inside a safe, maybe inside a secret library or something. Seiba thought about it and started making an equation. 1 notebook per student times a student body of 1,000 students times 50 years hypothetically, and he said you'd need a space as big as a small manga cafe for that. Shin asked so what, to which Seiba pointed out that it was clear that the database had been digitalized, because otherwise Shin would have found it by now. He explained that searching for a hard drive or USB drive in the entire school would be like looking for a needle in a haystack, and the idea of searching for it through physical means was ridiculous, and the only way was to look for people with information, and that Shin should start with the teacher who had been there the longest. As he was adding that, of course, he would avoid a certain person. Shin suddenly ran off to start searching, shouting thanks, which made Seiba just stare at him. The janitor there suddenly commented on how energetic Seiba's friend was, so Seiba greeted him, and also asked if he knew anything about the database, which made the janitor laugh and comment that it brings back memories, which puzzled Seiba. Someone then called him on his phone, and it turns out it was Mafuyu, and as he was about to answer, we shifted scenes and went to one of Akira's classes. Here, they seemed to be inside a dojo, and their teacher was explaining that the fundamental ideal of JCC is to become the embodiment of undetectable aggression. Many students apparently didn't understand this, and they were told they were neither martial artists nor street punks, but assassins. They needed to blend into their surroundings such as cities, people, and nature to achieve their missions. That was the reason why in this assassination practicum, they would learn how to conceal their aggression and other practical skills, and out of the entire school curriculum, this was the class where many students failed, so they should be extra vigilant, and when the students heard this, they felt nervous and pressured, with some commenting how scary it was, while Akira on the side just stared. But, as always, her nervousness quickly surfaced and she tearfully thought about how she would survive this. She then cryingly thought that she hadn't been able to keep up in any of her classes so far, and she feels like she's going to barf up the disgusting bowl of JCC bowl she had for lunch. Their mentor then started to cover his eyes and said that since it was their first day, they would start with something easy. He said he would wear a blindfold and they should charge at him one at a time whenever they're ready, which confused his students. He wanted them to feel how difficult it was to make themselves undetectable, and whoever could land a blow on him would get an A+. One of the students charged and tried to punch him in the face, but despite his blindfold, he easily dodged it and countered with a solid strike to the abdomen. The student felt the pain of his punch, and he added that he never said he wouldn't counterattack. Other students began to charge one by one, but like those before them, they were easily taken down by their instructor who commented that their aggression was loud and clear. On the other hand, Shin arrived and immediately called out to Akira, causing her to turn to him while still tearful, and he commented that it looked like she had taken an interesting class. Akira broke down and seemed overjoyed to see Shin, crying happily, and Shin said it looked like she was doing okay. The mentor there asked who Shin was and if he was registered for that class, to which Shin explained that he was just asking around, and he had heard that the teacher of this class, Satoda-sensei, had been at the school the longest. Shin said he wanted to ask him about the database, and when the other students heard his question, they suddenly laughed and started to ridicule Shin for believing in that urban legend. The teacher there, whom we'll assume is Satoda, stared at him and said he wasn't part of this class, so he should leave because he was just causing a disturbance, to which Shin just stared at him and suddenly put on a blindfold, mimicking Satoda. Shin said he would wear a blindfold, and if he could dodge all of the teacher's attacks, would he be able to talk to him then? Satoda's anger was visible as the veins on his head bulged, and the other students fell silent. Satoda agreed, but instead of using his fists, he suddenly pulled out a pistol and pointed it at Shin's face at point-blank range, but due to Shin's agility and mind-reading powers, he managed to dodge the bullet from the gun, causing Satoda to stare at him seriously while the student stared in shock. Shin commented on how merciless the sensei was for pulling out a gun right from the start, and as a counterattack, Shin delivered a high kick to Satoda's neck, which landed solidly and caused him to spit blood and fall. After that, Shin removed his blindfold and sarcastically asked if the sensei hadn't detected his aggression. The other students who saw this shouted in amazement and asked who Shin was, while Shin was disappointed because now that Satoda was unconscious, and even Akira commented that Shin was amazing. A woman who was with Satoda, who looked like a secretary, sighed and said she didn't know what the problem was with students these days, and she suddenly grabbed Shin by the wrist, which confused Shin, and he called her auntie. In an instant, this woman managed to twist Shin's arm using only her grip and a flick of his wrist and whole body in just one fell movement, causing Shin to cry out in pain and tear up, making the student step back in disbelief. The woman pointed out that she wasn't his auntie, and she was Satoda's sensei, who would be teaching that class, and it turned out the man from earlier was just her assistant. She laughingly questioned Shin's search for the database, and said she remembered 3 fools who were doing the same thing years ago. Shin was troubled by what Satoda had done to him, and he thought about how skilled she was and wondered who this old woman could be, while Akira was asking him about the database he was inquiring about. Satoda explained that it was just an urban legend, and it was said that if you found it, you would know everything about this school, including its graduates, and it was supposedly meant to serve as the Akashic records of the JCC, which amazed Akira and made her ask if it was true. Shin then said that they were here to look for information about a JCC graduate, the assassin killer known as Slur. Satoda bluntly and seriously replied no can do, which made Shin's eye twitch in irritation as he asked what she meant and why. So Satoda explained that she had heard about Slur, and that's all the students like them talked about, so they shouldn't do it as it was dangerous. Even if they found information about Slur inside the database and it led them to him, people at Shin's level would just be dead meat for those guys. Shin asked irritatedly what she was saying, so Satoda added that it didn't matter who they are, but she didn't want to let young people die. Extremely annoyed, Shin said not to underestimate him, and that she had just caught him off guard earlier, to which Satoda responded with really, and asked if he would use that excuse when he died. Shin snapped at this and moved quickly, where Akira tried to talk to him, but it was too late and he prepared to attack Satoda. But just like what happened earlier, Satoda just grabbed him by the wrist and easily brought his body down, causing him to slam hard on the floor. Satoda commented on how ironic it was that she taught kids how to be killers, but she didn't want her students to die. Shin tried to move despite his bones cracking, which made Akira cry out his name in concern. Shin seriously explained that Slur had attacked them before, and even family wasn't off limits to that man. So he wanted to know how he became like that no matter how dangerous it might be for him. He shouted that he didn't want to see the people important to him die, that's why he was here. In Satoda's mind, she commented that she was surprised that Shin could still speak in his extremely painful situation, and she also said verbally that in fact, if Shin was so determined to get his way, then let's see if he could score a hit on this retired old soldier. Shin and Akira stared at her, and Satoda added that but she still had classes to teach and things to do, so she couldn't waste any more time. She handed Shin an identification card and told him to take it, which confused Shin as to what it was, to which Satoda answered that it was an assassin permission slip. It was a license to target a specific person in JCC for 24 hours, and they used it for seniors taking their graduation tests. Suddenly, their school bell rang, so Satoda said there's the bell, and good luck to Shin. Satoda started walking out of the room, but someone quickly rushed at her. It turns out that instead of Shin, it was Akira who rushed at her and delivered an extraordinary strike, but she easily blocked it. Shin was surprised by what he saw, and Satoda asked if Akira wanted that too. Akira apologized to her and said she just had something she wanted to know as well. In Akira's mind, Shin read that she was looking for Ryan and saying that maybe that database could help find what she was looking for too. Akira bravely told Shin that while she might not have much to offer, she would do everything she could to help. In the next scene, Shin and Akira went to the infirmary to have Shin's left arm checked, and while here, Shin called Sakamoto and informed him of what happened, to which Sakamoto said he understood and asked if it was correct that the teacher seemed to know the location of the database, to which Shin agreed and quickly apologized to Sakamoto, which confused Sakamoto. Shin said he could have read the teacher's mind, but she did have a point. So he would defeat her properly and then find out what she knew, which made Sakamoto smile when he heard it and said he understood. After that, Sakamoto said, well, with Shin's current skills, he didn't think a teacher should be a problem, and he also asked what her name was. When Shin said her name was Satoda, Sakamoto suddenly jolted in surprise and his expression quickly changed as if he was nervous, and it turns out the reason for his reaction was that she had taken down both him and Nagumo using the same technique she used on Shin, and she had warned them that the next time she saw them fighting, she would break the bones in their arms, while Ryan was sitting beside them laughing, causing Nagumo to tell their sensei to scold her too. Sakamoto fell silent while remembering this, so Shin called out to him to check if he was still on the line, to which Sakamoto, sweating, told Shin that he had something he needed to look at first, which confused Shin, and he added that he trusted Shin to handle the situation. After that, Sakamoto ended the call, and Akira asked if Sakamoto was there too, and Shin stood up and invited Akira to start what they were going to do. While they were walking out of the infirmary, someone opened the curtain of one of the beds there, and it turned out to be Seiba, who seemed to have been listening to their conversation, but maybe not since he was wearing headphones. In the next scene, while in the hallway, Shin brought up what Akira did earlier and said in amazement that Akira had guts to attack a teacher like that, which made Akira say oh gosh and mention that the teacher was so good because she couldn't find any pathway. Shin was confused by what she meant by pathway, so Akira asked if he didn't see it sometimes, and she explained that it was like a thing that glows and points towards something, but Shin was still confused. So Akira added that when Satoda was far from her earlier, she saw many pathways, but when she got closer, they all disappeared and she only saw a cliff there. Shin asked if someone had given Akira some weird drug when she was young, which made Akira go huh. But Shin just brushed it off and said never mind, and anyway, they needed to find some kind of blind spot, to which Akira agreed. After that, they saw Satoda eating a bowl of ramen in the cafeteria, and while hiding, Akira asked what their plan was, so Shin explained that people are vulnerable when eating, which Akira understood and said they should attack now. The two quickly rushed at the teacher, who noticed them, but Shin thought it was still okay because Satoda had things in her hands. Shin jumped to deliver a quick strike, but before he could get close, Satoda blocked him using just chopsticks on his fingers, and with just a slight twist of her fingers, it caused extraordinary pain in his body, making Shin cry out in pain. While Shin was down on the side crying, Akira followed up and saw a pathway leading to Satoda's nape. However, Satoda suddenly turned to her and frighteningly asked if she saw something there, and it turns out that pathway wasn't for her, but for Satoda and how she could kill Akira. With one swing of Satoda's hand, Akira was thrown towards the wall, causing it to break and her to fly outside the cafeteria, and Satoda commented not even close. Shin worriedly asked Akira if she was okay, to which Akira replied that she was freaked out by Satoda's attack. Akira felt something behind her while she was leaning against the wall, and it turned out to be the invisible Seiba, whom Akira had hit when she was thrown. Shin was surprised by this, while Akira was even more freaked out because she saw an invisible person, and Seiba commented that things have changed and now he's helping too. Satoda commented that it seemed Shin had many friends, and she laughed while saying that it looked like she needed to be a little more serious. The four of them stared at each other, but they were interrupted when the bell rang, and Satoda started walking away while saying it was time to watch a clever assassin's life. Shin shouted that only novices turn their backs on an enemy, so they should charge at her, but before he could get far, Seiba tripped him, causing his face to hit the floor. Tearfully, Shin told Seiba he would kill this jerk, to which Seiba laughingly apologized, but said he was about to attack Satoda head-on and asked if he was an idiot, which made Shin grab his collar in anger, while adding that Shin would never defeat her that way. Seiba explained that when Satoda was younger, she was a master martial arts assassin, an Aikido master. Shin responded with really? And Seiba added that she returned from all her missions without even a scratch. Here, Shin realized that the moves she did earlier were Aikido, while Akira asked if Aikido wasn't a martial art that specializes in deflecting the attacks of your opponent back at them, to which Seiba explained that Aikido isn't considered a martial art suited for killing, but after Satoda-sensei, it became a required skill for assassins, and he ridiculed Shin for still thinking he could face her head-on, saying it was laughable, which irritated Shin again. Nevertheless, Shin brushed it off and said anyway, why did Seiba suddenly decide to help, and what did he mean by things changing? So Seba explained that he received a phone call from Mafuyu, but he didn't say anything, so for some reason, he could hear Slur's henchmen talking in the background, which surprised Shin. In the next scene, we went to Mafuyu and Toromaru's situation at a point in time, and here Mafuyu suddenly woke up and immediately sat up in his bed, while Toromaru greeted him good morning and asked if he slept well because it sounded like he had experienced a nightmare. Toromaru also commented that he slept a lot, and there was nothing to do there, and she had already watched all of The Bachelor. Mafuyu, seemingly very worried, said it's all over, but it turns out his only problem was that he fell asleep without taking a bath, which surprised Toromaru, who asked if that was the issue. Mafuyu noticed something on his legs and saw that they were wrapped in bandages, so he asked Toromaru if she did that, to which Toromaru shook her head and explained that Kashima did it, and she called him Mr. Nice Dear, and he even brought them hamburgers and drinks. So Mafuyu asked why they were receiving VIP treatment like having their wounds treated and being given food, and if they were being mocked because they didn't even take their weapons. Toromaru said that she waited for him to wake up and asked if he was okay or not, and invited him to eat the ice cream she was holding and then they could leave, to which Mafuyu replied that he couldn't eat melted ice cream and that it was disgusting. After that, they observed the warehouse they were in, and they wondered what this dirty place was, thinking it might be some kind of factory. Mafuyu noticed there were no guards around, and Toromaru put her hand on his shoulder and commented if that wasn't scary, to which he just asked if she had washed her hands, irritating Toromaru, who hit his shoulder while saying how rude he was. While backing up, Toromaru hit something on the floor that caused her to trip. She fell on what was blocking her way, and it turned out to be a sleeping man, which made both their eyes widen in shock and nervousness. Toromaru quickly stood up and they both moved away, but despite the noise and commotion they made, the man was still asleep, leaving them speechless and thinking how deep of a sleeper he was. While walking away from the man, Mafuyu whispered to Toromaru that he couldn't believe she tripped over the man, to which Toromaru replied that it was just an accident. They continued to explore the large warehouse, and while walking, Mafuyu said, "Wait a minute," which made Toromaru ask what it was. So Mafuyu pointed to a slightly open door in front of them and asked if Toromaru could hear a sound coming from there, to which Toromaru replied that he was right, and she went yikes in fear. They tried to peek at what was behind this door, and they saw Slur mumbling words while holding his face as if confused, and while they were observing this, Kashima suddenly appeared behind them and asked if they had decided to take a walk. As soon as he touched them, they quickly turned and ran away, forcing Kashima to use his mechanical body parts to stop them. He removed his deer helmet and said that wasn't the way to the bathroom. After Mafuyu dodged, he landed on a spot and seemed to have stepped on something, and when he looked at what he had stepped on, it turned out to be a cockroach, which caused him to break down and shout for them to kill him because he had stepped on a cockroach. So Toromaru yelled at him that this wasn't the time for that. Kashima also seemed affected by the sight of Mafuyu stepping on the cockroach, and he suddenly approached and shouted how could Mafuyu do that, and that no matter how small it was, a life is a life. This left Mafuyu and Toromaru speechless, and then Kashima suddenly stepped hard on the cockroach and said that if they were going to kill, they should have mercy and watch the complete demise of what they're killing. He said these young people don't appreciate the importance of life, and they weren't fit to be assassins. Toromaru was disgusted by Kashima's display, saying it was cringy and asked if he was a cockroach fan, while Mafuyu commented that their situation was just getting worse as they both prepared to fight. Angrily, Kashima told them to be careful how they spoke to him, and that they had no manners, so because of that, he needed to punish them, and he pressed a button. Suddenly, something exploded behind them, destroying a large part of the wall there. Toromaru and Mafuyu turned to look at the source of the explosion, while the sleeping man from earlier was still asleep. Kashima explained that when he treated them earlier, he had embedded a bomb like the one they just saw into their bodies, and it was about the size of a grain of rice, but extremely powerful. This caused visible nervousness on Mafuyu's face, and he asked if he had put something dirty in his body. Someone laughed beside them, and it turned out to be Slur, who looked dizzy, and he said it was a surprise present and asked if they were happy with it, adding that they needed some thrills to live a good life. Toromaru got angry and said she didn't want that and it was too scary, to which Slur just grinned while looking at her. While Toromaru was staring at Slur, she suddenly felt a strange feeling and her bias seemed to change, becoming a fan of Slur instead of Sakamoto. So she started questioning herself about this. It seems that doing brutal things while smiling was her weakness because she said it wasn't fair, and the contrast was too intense, so it got to her, to which Mafuyu commented for her to stop being a creep. Slur then spoke to Kashima and said that the sound of that bomb was a bit loud. So Kashima apologized and asked if it had woken him up, while Mafuyu was thinking about what he should do. It turns out that this was where Mafuyu had called Seiba's cell phone to let him hear what was happening to him, and he had picked up what Kashima said about it being bigger than he thought, so even he was a bit surprised by it. We return to the present where Seiba was explaining to Shin that when Mafuyu calls without speaking, it usually means he's in a bad situation and needs help, but he's too embarrassed to ask for it, which made Shin comment that it was such a pain. Seiba added that he had been trying to figure it out for a long time, but he hadn't seen any clues about Mafuyu or Slur's whereabouts. He said it was stupid, but he thought the database was his last hope, and he needed any help he could get to find his little brother. Akira then said that, but to get that database, they needed to defeat Satoda, the toughest teacher in their school, to which Shin agreed and asked if he had a plan or something. So Seiba replied that, well, he didn't want to brag, but he was an ace weapon maker. Shin seemed irritated and put off by Seiba's statement, so he impersonated him while Akira just stared, and Shin commented on who would say such a thing about themselves, which made Seiba ask if he was really that ugly, causing Shin to become even more irritated and pull out a gun to shoot Seiba, but Akira tried to stop him while Seiba was saying that honestly, he should be thanked, which made Shin shout for what, and Seiba pointed out that he was offering to make him a weapon. In the next scene, they went to the weapons manufacturing department, and here, Seiba Sr., who had gotten angry at him earlier for melting his weapon, was hiding a weapon under a cabinet, saying it was better to hide it before Seiba returned. He said he would hide his work here, and he was sure Seiba wouldn't melt his creation this time. However, Seiba arrived and pointed out that the hiding place was too obvious, and he wouldn't hide it there if he were him, which surprised the senior and made him say, "Damn it." Shin also announced that they had returned, which made the senior turn and shout at Seiba to stop bringing outsiders in and to respect the sanctity of the place. Akira also entered and excused herself, explaining that it was her first time in the weapons department and she just wanted to observe. When the other students there saw Akira, they seemed to suddenly become simps and immediately approached her, saying it was no problem and she could stay as long as she wanted, which made Shin shout and ask why their voices suddenly became so gentle, to which Seiba explained that weapons nerds have zero immunity to girls. After that, Shin asked what kind of weapon Seiba was going to make, and Seiba replied that he had no clue and asked back what kind of weapon Shin usually used. So Shin explained that he always relied on his ESP, and he had never mastered a specific weapon, but actually, from watching Sakamoto all these years, he always had the sense that only third-rate assassins depended on weapons, so he pretty much avoided them. Seiba stared at him and seriously asked if that meant Shin thought he was first-rate like Sakamoto, which caught both his and Akira's attention, and Shin answered somewhat irritatedly that that wasn't what he meant. Seiba asked if Shin didn't think that the fastest way to becoming first-rate was to first accept that he was third-rate, which made Shin think more deeply, and he remembered Tormara's comment when she found out he liked to counterattack and decided to take him down in one go, as well as Satoda's comment that someone at his level would just be dead meat if they faced Slur's men. Seiba added that besides, Shin's body had no similarity to Sakamoto's, and it was ridiculous, pointing out that in boxing, just 2 kilos would be enough to move him to a different weight class. Because of this, Shin snapped and shouted for Seiba to shut up, calling him a jerk, and told him to just give him a weapon and that he didn't care what it was, and he started rummaging through the weapons box, which stunned Seiba. Shin grabbed a taser gun and felt an extraordinary shock in his body, and Seiba explained that it was a taser prototype. Shin's body seemed to burn after being electrocuted, so Akira tearfully asked if he was okay, while Seiba was looking at the taser gun and explaining that the trigger was too sensitive when the power was set to high. He then threw a small sphere at Shin and told him to look at it, and when Shin caught it, it opened and suddenly froze his entire body, and Seiba explained that it was a liquid nitrogen bomb capable of freezing a person, but the only problem was that it took 2 days to reload. Next, they tested the scream gun, which Seiba explained would emit a deafening scream when the bullet hit, and it could also be used for music, so it might be useful, to which Akira commented that she felt a bit sorry for whoever got hit by that bullet, while Shin shouted asking what good that gun was. Seiba then showed a light-up sword, but it was difficult to use because it hurt the eyes and needed to be plugged in. After that, they tested various things like fire shoes, spiny knives, with or without spines, and many others. After testing all of these, Shin was beaten up and shouted that didn't Seiba say he was an ace weapons manufacturer, but everything they used was so useless, while Seiba was still showing other weapons. The seniors there approached Shin and commented that what they were seeing was somewhat refreshing, and that Seiba was pranking someone other than them for a change. Shin said disappointedly that he had heard Seiba was some kind of genius, so he thought he would have many amazing inventions, but everything they saw was just trash, to which one of the seniors replied that it didn't work like that and Seiba didn't show it, but people only saw the final results. In reality, Seiba would enter the lab earlier than anyone else and be the last to leave. That's how Seiba really worked. He had made millions of prototypes, and this senior was betting that Seiba held the school record for most failed projects. But among all that trash, occasionally something extraordinary would be created, and that was the fruit of an incredible amount of effort. That was the reason why they liked and respected Seiba, no matter how annoying he could be. Shin pondered this, and Seiba approached him carrying a box of weapons, saying they should test these, which irritated Shin, who asked if he was really experimenting on him, causing the senior who had spoken to Shin to think that maybe Seiba just really wanted to make weapons. Shin calmed down quickly and agreed to start, and Seiba, while holding what looked like a saw, asked if he wanted to wear something on his hand, which made Shin shout at him to put that away. Shin noticed something on the table beside him and stared at a glove, so he took it and put it on, asking what this glove was, to which Seiba replied that it was his latest disaster, which made Shin ask how come. So Seiba explained that this weapon removed the limiter of his brain, giving the wearer access to extreme strength. Just one blow from it would completely annihilate your opponent, if it landed. Shin tried the glove and threw some punches, but he was confused because nothing seemed to happen. However, while he was trying it, it suddenly made a buzzing sound and then crackled. When Shin punched, it caused a powerful impact on the wall in front of him, and with just one punch, a large part of that wall was destroyed, which shocked both Akira and Shin. Seiba explained to Shin that there was a lag of a few seconds before the weapon activated. Shin was thrown back by his own punch, so the seniors there tried to help him up, and he asked what had happened. Suddenly, his gloved hand twitched, and he felt an extraordinary pain coming from it. One of the seniors noticed that Shin's arm was bright red, so they said they should take him to the infirmary immediately, while Akira was asking if Shin was okay. Despite the pain Shin felt, he smiled and commented that Seiba was truly first-rate, which confused Seiba, who asked if he had heard him, and said that the delayed action was a fatal flaw in close combat, and it was useless unless you could see the future. While Seiba was saying this, Shin was shown with his eyes seemingly glowing after using the glove, and he was also grinning. On the other hand, we went to Slur's hideout where Mafuyu and Tormaru were, and here, Gaku was asking Kashima if he had business with JCC, and if he wanted him to just go in and destroy the inside, and only then did Kashima notice him and commented that he was awake, and it turns out Gaku was the one sleeping deeply earlier. Kashima said that it was indeed possible, but it would be extremely cumbersome, which confused Gaku. He explained that JCC was on a remote island, and the tides there were too complex to dock a boat, and the surrounding airspace was protected by homing missiles that would intercept any vessel without official business at JCC. While he was explaining this, he saw that Gaku was already playing with his handheld again, so he went silent and thought that he wasn't listening anyway. Slur arrived and told Gaku not to worry, and Gaku greeted him. Slur explained that this was why they had Amane with them. Kashima asked if they could really rely on him. So Slur explained that he reminded him of himself when he was young, and he was dumb enough to pull it off. However, Kashima said he was still just a child, and no one could say if he might change his mind. Someone else arrived and said not to worry, and it turned out to be Club Jam, who said he wouldn't betray them and that he had made sure of it. Kashima stared at Club Jam, and Club Jam grinned at him. In the next scene, we briefly revisited the conversation between Kashima and Amane, where Kashima told Amane that his entrance exam to join their group was to destroy the database. After that, we moved to a higher-up giving Sakamoto the master keys to all classrooms, and he thanked him. The person who gave him the keys asked what he was going to use them for, so Sakamoto explained that he needed them to organize his things, to which the staff member replied to be careful not to lose them because they were important. Sakamoto started walking around and decided to begin with the South Hall. While walking, his hidden belly suddenly bulged again, and a man noticed it. So he quickly returned it to normal while thinking that he was starting to transform back to normal, and he didn't want to be fat while disguised as Aoi. He also thought that he needed to return to the store because he had left the work there to the two nut jobs, Heisuki and Lu. Suddenly, he felt something at his side, and it turned out that a fast projectile had begun to fly towards him, but due to his reaction time, he easily deflected it using his writing board, and it turned out to be a multi-bodied staff with a blade at the end. However, that weapon managed to get the master keys he was holding, and the person who threw it at him quickly retrieved them. The man who did it said that he didn't expect him to dodge the attack, and it turned out to be Amane who was responsible for it when he asked him what his problem was. Amane apologized to him while calling him intern teacher, while Sakamoto was thinking about why Amane felt familiar to him. Amane explained that he needed to borrow those keys and thanked him for getting them from the office. When Sakamoto closely observed Amane's weapon and the look in his eyes, he suddenly remembered one of his former comrades when he was still part of the order. Sakamoto's eyes widened when he realized this, and he asked him if he was Yatsumura's son. Amane stared at him seriously and asked how he knew that name, to which he just stared back, but soon explained that they had worked together a while back, and he had mentioned having a child. While he was explaining, Amane suddenly cut him off and said that he wasn't a father, which surprised Sakamoto. Amane said that man was the murderer who destroyed his family, and he suddenly jumped away from where he had been standing, and only then did Sakamoto realize that he had taken the keys. Amane quickly ran away from where Sakamoto was, and he thought about what he had said about the teacher having worked with Yatsumura and asked himself who that teaching intern could be. He heard the sound of clanging metal above him, and it turned out to be Sakamoto, who had managed to catch up to him despite his head start. Sakamoto jumped in front of him and immediately told him that he didn't need those keys and to return them to him. Amane said that he was looking for something, so he was sorry but he needed them, to which Sakamoto stretched and held his shoulder, saying it was a coincidence because he needed them too. Amane ran again, so Sakamoto was forced to chase him through the hallway, and while they were running, Sakamoto commented in his mind that Amane was fast. They even reached the kitchen, and because of this, they somewhat disturbed those who were cooking, and Amane even broke through a glass wall just to get away from him. Sakamoto grabbed some bread to eat while running, while the cooks were annoyed at them. It seemed to become a scene from a show where Amane slid through two people carrying a heavy crate full of weapons. Sakamoto quickly ate the bread he was holding, and he jumped and somersaulted to avoid the two men. And while somersaulting, he grabbed a pistol from the crate and immediately tried to shoot Amane but missed, and he managed to enter another room. He returned the pistol to the crate and commented that the feed ramp needed polishing, while one of the carriers seemed to swoon and commented that Sakamoto smelled good. After that, we moved to the intro to assassin history class, and here Amane arrived, thinking that since Sakamoto was a teacher, he wouldn't disrupt the class. The teacher there continued teaching, while the students were amazed because they recognized Amane as the second-year assassin major with the best grades in that school. Amane sat at the back, and the student in front of him immediately spoke to him and said that he didn't usually come to class, to which he just said hi. The student asked if he wanted to copy their notes, saying they owed him for helping in the last test, but Amane didn't accept and said not to worry about it. Sakamoto entered that class, and the teacher recognized him as the new teaching intern, and Sakamoto said he wanted to observe the class, while Amane commented that he wasn't letting up. Sakamoto positioned himself behind Amane, and while the teacher was teaching and asking a student to read page 56 of their textbooks, Sakamoto and Amane began to fight in the back. The student read from the textbook that in 1949, Mitsuharu Yuta and his 7 companions established an assassins alliance to unify Japanese assassins as a deterrent to other organizations. Their fight continued while the student kept reading that they established the JAA Special Organization, but it was disbanded due to backlash from other organizations for taking a 10% cut of the profits. Due to Sakamoto's skill and experience in fighting, he managed to punch Amane twice in the face while the teacher was telling the students that the part their classmate read always appears in tests. After Amane's classmate finished reading, the teacher looked for the next person to read, but when he turned to the back of the class, Sakamoto and Amane were gone. So he commented that he thought he had seen that student, and even the student in front of Amane wondered where he was. Because of this, someone else read and began reading about the International Assassin Summit. After that, it turns out Sakamoto had taken Amane to the stairs, and Amane thought to himself that this teacher was tough, and here Sakamoto learned that he was also a follower of Slur. Sakamoto asked why Amane wanted the master keys to all classrooms, so Amane replied that he had nothing to say to a JAA doc. Sakamoto asked why he hated the JAA so much when his father was a member. Because of this, Amane shouted in anger and said that was the reason, and he needed to destroy that old man and the JAA. Sakamoto stared at him and explained that Yatsumura loved his child, and it would make him sad if he knew Amane hated him, saying this while imagining Hana saying it to him. Angrily, Amane said what did Sakamoto know about this, and pointed out that Yatsumura himself killed his mother. Sakamoto fell silent at this and asked what Amane meant, but Amane just replied that he shouldn't pry into other people's personal affairs to satisfy his curiosity, and that it was bad manners. Besides, Amane said he didn't believe Sakamoto and there was something off about him, which puzzled Sakamoto. So Amane pointed out that his wrist was several centimeters fatter than when he saw him in the dorm, his pant legs were 5 millimeters shorter, and his belt was fastened one hole looser. Amane said that little by little, his whole body was expanding, which made Sakamoto wonder if he had a photographic memory. Amane added that the human body doesn't change that quickly, so who was Sakamoto really? To which Sakamoto feigned ignorance and questioned what Amane was saying about expanding, telling him not to be rude. However, while explaining that nothing was happening and that he was just a regular teaching intern, his disguise could no longer hold and the original size of his body emerged. Amane's eyes widened in shock and he immediately ran away from Sakamoto, bumping into him in the process. It turns out that the reason Amane bumped into Sakamoto was to take back the master keys, which worried Sakamoto. Amane jumped out of the stair railings, and after jumping, he brought out his multi-bodied staff. He used it to destroy the railings surrounding him, causing them to detach from their respective stairs. Due to Amane's maneuver, he managed to block his landing spot with the railings to prevent Sakamoto from following, and when he reached a floor, he quickly ran while Sakamoto just stared at him. Sakamoto also jumped to a floor while thinking that he needed to suck in his fat here, and soon he managed to return to his disguise. After Sakamoto returned to his disguise, someone commented, seeming concerned, and it turned out to be a janitor who said they couldn't have people destroying handrails there, adding that there was always something being damaged in the assassination department. Sakamoto stared at this janitor, and he seemed to notice something about him, realizing that this janitor had been here since he was a student. Sakamoto felt nostalgic and said it brings back memories, and suddenly the janitor commented that it had been a while since they'd seen each other and called him Sakamoto, even asking how Nagumo was doing, which left him speechless and confused. Nervously, Sakamoto asked how he recognized him despite his disguise, so the janitor happily explained that he could tell by his movements, and besides, he hadn't seen any student there with that face. The janitor added that now Sakamoto's vibe was softer, and he didn't recognize him at first, which gave Sakamoto chills and made him think to himself how freaky that was. After that, the janitor started picking up the broken handrails, and while doing so, he said he was happy Sakamoto had returned, and pointed out that Amane was strong, and it was difficult for him to find a playmate who could keep up. Sakamoto asked if the janitor knew about Amane, to which the janitor proudly said of course, because he was his grandson, which left Sakamoto speechless and shocked again. The janitor pointed out that Amane had inherited his nose and mouth, and the only thing that child got from his father was his eyes, which made Sakamoto stare intently at the janitor's face while thinking, really? The janitor explained that Amane was a good child, and he had raised him here at JCC since he was 7 years old. He said he couldn't always be with him due to work, and he worried about him growing up in this environment. But somehow, he grew up with a strong North Star, and in fact, he was so strong that sometimes he worried he would lead him astray, and he honestly didn't know where Amane got it from. Afterwards, the janitor picked up the handrails he could carry, and before leaving, he reminded Sakamoto that if he saw Amane, to tell him to visit the janitor's room sometime, to which Sakamoto tried to speak to him further but let him leave. In the next scene, inside a building that looked like a library, Amane was shown panting heavily while staring at the master key he had stolen from Sakamoto, and irritatedly thought why. He said there was nothing in JCC that he hadn't explored, like under the stairs in the south building, the library, and the gym. So he irritatedly said there was no sign of the database anywhere. Amane remembered Kashima's requirement that his deadline was within 24 hours, which made him even more worried and irritated. And while thinking that if he didn't find it soon, he suddenly had a flashback. It turns out this flashback seemed to be from the time he saw Yatsumura holding a bloody 3-section staff, while his mother lay bloodied on the floor, and here he was asking why his dad had done this. He also clearly remembered his father's look after he saw him, and he suddenly returned to the present when his cell phone rang. He answered it, and it turned out to be Kashima calling, who told him the limit was almost up, and also asked if he had any good news for them, to which Amane nervously said not yet. Because of this, a frightening aura seemed to surround Kashima, and he seriously said how unfortunate that was because he was looking forward to having new colleagues. But what could he do if he wasn't motivated? Amane pleaded for them to wait because he wanted to fight alongside Slur, and he also wanted to work with them to destroy JAA and his father. So he hoped Kashima would give him a little more time and promised to find it. Kashima replied and explained that in that case, he wants Amane to shut down the missile defensive system of JCC's key defensive power. Kashima asked what he thought about that, which confused Amane, and Kashima added that it was a tad aggressive but more of a sure thing than a treasure hunt. So he asked what did Amane think, to which Amane asked why he wanted to shut it down. Just as Kashima was about to answer, we suddenly moved to where Club Jam and Kanaguri were, and here Club Jam was asking why he didn't want to film him, to which Kanaguri ignored him and just marveled at a flock of seagulls, saying that birds flying signaled a turning point in a story. Club Jam peeked at his shot and commented that it seemed he wasn't paying attention to him and how fun this game was. He said it was amusing because they didn't do this with his big brother, to which Kanaguri just got irritated and commented that something had appeared in his shot, so now he had to start over. Club Jam laughed and praised JCC for their exceptional security and said he was looking forward to experiencing their pain, to which Kanaguri replied that he was really disgusting. After that, Kashima's answer continued, and he frighteningly said here that they just wanted to recreate the massacre at the JAA, and when Amane heard this, it seemed like a chill crept through his body, while Kanaguri and Club Jam appeared to be starting their plan. And when Kanaguri learned that they were going to a school, he was delighted because he could film a coming-of-age movie there like Stand By Me. In the next scene, we move to the situation of Akira, Shin, and Seiba, and here Seiba gave his power enhancer glove to Shin. So he asked if that glove had been beefed up, to which Seiba said that Shin had mentioned he could see about 0.5 seconds into the future, which Shin agreed with. So Seiba further explained that he adjusted the lag of the glove to be just 0.5 seconds, but it would be weaker now, which made Shin shout what in disbelief. After that, Shin asked if he wanted more power. Would he need to read further into the future? And Seiba agreed and said that the more he allowed it to build up, the more power it would have, but even now, it was stronger than when Shin was barehanded. Shin put on the glove, and Seiba said it was almost impossible to attack Satoda because if Shin tried to grab her, she would just use Aikido to deflect the blow, and even if they miraculously managed to hit her, they wouldn't have enough strength to do much damage. This caught Shin and Akira's attention as if they had noticed something, and Seiba added that this is where the glove comes in, to which Shin agreed, and Seiba said in other words, he and Akira would somehow create an opening, and before their sensei could do anything, Shin needed to hit her with that glove. Akira was worried about their plan, but while Shin was looking at her, he suddenly remembered and asked if he's right that she could see it, which confused Akira. So Shin explained that he was referring to the thing she sees as the path to killing someone. And that's when she realized what Shin was talking about, while Seiba was puzzled. Seiba asked what Shin was saying and if she had ESP too. So Akira said no, and that it's more like she can see how and where her body will move to reach the vital points of her opponent, like a flip animation, but with a catch. While listening to this, Seiba commented in his mind that he had never heard of such a thing, and questioned if Akira was a genius. Akira's catch was that when she tried to see the path to Satoda, she saw a chasm blocking it, so she probably wouldn't be much help in their plan, to which Shin just stared at her as if thinking about something. After that, we went to Satoda-sensei, and she was looking at something in her bag. She noticed that she seemed to have forgotten to bring something to her last class in the gym, so she went there, and another teacher in the faculty asked what she had forgotten. So she explained that it was a TNT bomb she had confiscated from a student. When she entered the gym, she immediately saw it, so she picked it up, but as she picked it up, she suddenly felt something in her surroundings, but it turned out to be just a basketball bouncing towards her. She also picked up this basketball and thought about who might have left it there, but unexpectedly, the ball suddenly burst, startling her, and after it exploded, Shin immediately rushed at her from behind while commenting that apparently it was a ball-shaped surprise popper. However, Satoda was not shaken by this and easily countered the rushing Shin from behind, managing to throw him and shoot him into the basketball hoop, causing Akira to shout in concern while pushing a basket full of basketballs. Satoda said Shin was light and asked if he ate enough. Shin's body was shot into the ring, so he said, "Damn it," in irritation, and he immediately punched it with his gloved hand to break it, and as he was falling, he took the ring from his body and threw it towards Satoda. Satoda noticed this and used just her fingers to hold the ring coming at her, managing to stop its rapid flight with a delicate grip on that ring. Akira was amazed at Satoda's very light touch here, while Seiba, using his invisible hoodie, also rushed at Satoda's back while holding one side of a volleyball net. Shin also ran towards Satoda, but despite the efforts of these two, Satoda easily used Aikido on them while saying they both failed the test. The two were thrown back, and after they were thrown, irritation was visible on Shin's face while Seiba remained nonchalant. Satoda noticed the time and said she needed to prepare for her next class, but her attention was diverted when someone suddenly shouted from her side, coming from the other side of the wall, so she quickly turned and noticed that it sounded like a woman shouting there. When she turned, she only saw a crack in the wall from a bullet, and it turns out Seiba had used the scream gun there, and he commented that it was surprisingly helpful. While Satoda was still distracted, Akira quickly rushed in while holding a racket, and soon she managed to hit Satoda solidly on the head with it. However, it turns out that Satoda had only blocked her strike using her fingers, which surprised Akira while Satoda immediately countered by grabbing her arm while saying she was still green. Satoda threw Akira to the side, but it didn't happen when Akira pulled her clothes, so she delivered another strike to make her let go. Akira stepped back a little, but quickly rushed in again, and here Satoda realized that she was learning through fighting her. Satoda observed Akira's attacks on her, and she commented in her mind that Akira was still imprecise, but she had a rare talent for killing. She knew things like efficient pathways and intuitively grasped the movements of killing, so she thought it was like playing with Ryo. Akira tried to trip her by kicking her foot, but she managed to jump quickly, which caught Akira's attention. After jumping, Akira stared at her and noticed a pathway to kill her. Satoda commented in her mind that, however, she couldn't allow students to get into dangerous situations, so she created another chasm to cut off the pathway Akira was seeing. Because of this, Akira was troubled and thought she couldn't reach her. Nevertheless, unexpectedly, Shin arrived there, using Seiba's invisible jacket so they didn't notice him. Satoda turned to this while Akira was surprised by the event and Seiba just watched. Running through Shin's mind at this time were the times he was defeated and how it was the same as before when he couldn't keep up with his opponent's movements. He said here in his mind that he admitted to Seiba that he wasn't a first-rate assassin like Sakamoto. He said he would learn here by watching Akira's future movements. Shin prepared to punch while asking if it was okay for Akira if he took this pathway. Satoda stared at him while Seiba shouted for him to do it, and using his gloved hand, he delivered an extraordinary punch towards Satoda that caused a powerful impact. However, despite Shin's solid punch, Seiba couldn't believe that Satoda was still able to use Aikido on it. As a counterattack, Satoda placed Shin's arm in front of her and pulled his clothes closer, then delivered a strike to his body that sent him flying into a wall. In Seiba and Shin's minds, they both said that what they were doing was no use, while Akira quickly ran towards the thrown Shin. On Satoda's side, her left hand that she used to block Shin's punch earlier started to tremble, so she held it while thinking that these kids had come a long way in such a short time, and she wondered how they had done it. Satoda suddenly cried and smiled while thinking that they were so dedicated, which confused Shin and the others, and they asked what happened and if she had allergies. Despite their young age, Satoda thought to herself that she had gotten carried away and almost killed them. Shin heard this due to his clairvoyant powers, so he jolted, while Akira approached Satoda to apologize and asked if she had hurt them, to which Shin tried to pull her back while Satoda happily said what a good girl she was. Satoda commented that this was wonderful because each of them had used their strengths and combined them beautifully, which seemed to please Shin and Akira when they heard it. But Satoda quickly added that they still had a long way to go, which made the two fall silent. Satoda then called out to Seiba, who asked why, and she told him that his invisibility suit didn't conceal sound or his physical presence, so how would he handle a target that didn't rely on vision, saying it needed improvement. Because of this, Shin teased him and said he got lectured, which annoyed him and made him ask for his invisibility suit back, saying he wouldn't lend it to him anymore. Satoda also asked Akira if Akira was her correct name, to which Akira agreed, and Satoda told her that she had incredible eyes because she could see the route to her target with extraordinary accuracy, which made Akira blush and thank her profusely. However, Satoda said, she wouldn't progress using talent alone, and if she just rushed in whenever there was an opening, she would put herself in danger. She said it was the same in sports where players with the sharpest attention are frequently fooled by feints. Akira thought about this and said she now understood that Satoda had created the pathway she saw earlier on purpose. Still, Satoda said, that courage to enter was wonderful, so she should continue with it, to which Akira happily agreed while blushing at being praised again. After that, Satoda addressed Shin and told him that his type of class dies early, and she immediately grabbed his gloved hand, causing Shin to cry out in pain. Satoda pointed out that he was willing to pay any price in exchange for great power, and he shouldn't use such things because they were like drugs. She asked why he was in such a hurry, so Shin replied that because he knew he wasn't talented or strong enough, but that was his problem because his enemy wouldn't wait for him to get stronger, so he needed to use whatever he had. Satoda stared at him and closed her eyes. While holding his gloved arm, it started to move on its own, which confused Shin, but he quickly realized that it was reacting reflexively and tried to punch Satoda in the face, which worried him. However, Satoda easily changed the trajectory of his punch, which surprised him. Satoda explained to him that using her hips as her axis, she used circular motion to deflect an attack. In this way, she said, his core would become stable like a spinning top, and it would be easier to counter, and this idea was called the rotation principle. And if they could determine the direction of an attacking energy, strength, muscles, and gender wouldn't matter anymore. After her teaching, Akira was about to speak, but was interrupted when Satoda said that the students had given a great effort there, and because of that, she thought she needed to answer their question. Shin was surprised by this and asked if what he was thinking she would answer was correct, and Satoda suddenly said that the database was a nickname for a certain person. Because of that, Shin and the others were puzzled and fell silent while asking what she meant, so Satoda pointed out that yes, and more precisely, it was a classmate of hers with preternatural memory, which made Shin and Akira go in confusion. Satoda added that this person still worked with her at this school, and as she was saying this, we suddenly moved to the janitor that Sakamoto was talking to earlier, walking in the school park. Because of this scene transition while Satoda was speaking, we can now assume that this janitor is the classmate with preternatural memory that Satoda was referring to. This janitor went to see his grandson Amane, who was sitting on a bench there, and as soon as Amane turned to him, he immediately hit him on the head while calling him a fool. Amane was irritated and asked what that was for, so the janitor replied irritatedly that his teacher had told him that Amane wasn't showing up to any classes. Amane pointed out that he had hit him on the head 782 times, and he would report him to the PDA to get him fired from his job. His grandfather replied that he was wrong and it was 783 times, and he still remembered all the dates when he did it, which made Amane fall silent. After that, they sat on a bench and Amane asked his grandfather if that was the reason he came there. So his grandfather asked him if he thought he didn't know what was going on, which confused him. His grandfather said that recently he had been supporting a shady assassin group and he didn't want him to associate with them, which made Amane look away as if he had been caught. His grandfather explained that he knew he hated JAA because of his father, and that he didn't need to become an assassin and should just get a regular job. Amane got his grandfather's attention and seriously asked if he wasn't angry that his own daughter had been killed, and he also said that he wouldn't be satisfied until he killed his father with his own hands. After Amane said this, his grandfather suddenly changed the topic and said he saw him running away from a cute teacher in training earlier. So he asked if he thought he was really hot stuff, and as his grandfather, he was embarrassed for him. Amane was utterly surprised, and he couldn't believe that his grandfather was watching earlier. His grandfather then stood up and said, well, no wonder Amane was no match for that teacher, to which Amane asked if his grandfather knew her, so his grandfather replied yes, ever since they were students. He explained that out of 38,764 students he had seen, that student was by far the best fighter, which caught Amane's attention. Before leaving, his grandfather told him to remember one thing, and that was no matter what happens, he would always be on his side. If anything was troubling him, he said he could always talk to him or his teachers. Amane remembered what Kashima had told him about wanting to recreate the massacre at the JAA and how his classmates supported Slur, which made him think. In the next scene, Kashima called him again and asked about their request for him to shut down JCC's security system, and if he had thought about it. Amane replied that he would do it on one condition. They should promise him that they wouldn't harm the students and teachers, which puzzled Kashima. Amane pointed out that wasn't their goal to destroy the database and erase all records of the boss, not to massacre everyone. Kashima agreed and said he preferred to settle things peacefully if possible, so he soon accepted Amane's condition. After that, he said they would talk again soon, and he ended the call. Gaku, sitting beside him, commented that any security system that could be broken by a child was trash, and Slur added that even the strongest locks were easily broken from the inside, and besides, JCC was super soft on good students, which pissed him off. Kashima explained to Gaku that the best students had privileges to enter various buildings, which made Gaku realize why they needed a nerd there. After that, we returned to JCC, and here Amane went to the Central Control Office security room. Amane took out his ID here, and soon a loud alarm started, announcing code 37564, and that the security system had been forced to shut down, and the system would recover in 10 seconds. This alarm caught the attention of Shin's group, and also Sakamoto's side, while Slur Pokerface said that now it was time to erase memories. After that, we returned to a point in time before that alarm sounded, and here, Amane had managed to enter the control room and had already taken down the security personnel. He quickly informed Kashima that he was there, so Kashima ordered him to shut off the security system. Kashima explained that their comrades who specialize in search operations were on standby near JCC airspace, and they would proceed to destroy the database, and now Amane was an official member of their group. Amane swung his multi-section staff to destroy the control panel, but he was stopped when Sakamoto arrived and managed to grab his staff. Sakamoto said he couldn't let this happen, while Amane showed visible shock at the event. Sakamoto pointed out that they were talking about destroying the database earlier. Amane was silent for a moment, but quickly turned to Sakamoto and asked him not to interfere and who he was anyway. Sakamoto asked if he was selling out JCC to Slur, and Amane replied asking what he knew and that he had no other choice, to which Sakamoto held his shoulder and said he understood him. When going through a rebellious phase, he said, one thinks that doing bad stuff is cool. He also said he didn't know what he would do if Hana went through this phase too. Because of this, Amane got weirded out and tried to explain about his father, but thought that Sakamoto wasn't listening to him. Sakamoto explained that JCC had nothing to do with his father and asked if he wanted to hurt the people important to him, to which Amane replied of course not. While they were talking, it turns out Kashima was still on the line on Amane's phone, and he asked if that was Sakamoto's wife he was seeing because Sakamoto was still disguised as his wife Aoi, and what was she doing there? Sakamoto ordered him not to disturb this child, and if Kashima showed up at JCC, he wouldn't get any mercy from him. Because of this, Kashima sweated nervously and thought that this woman's vibe was so fierce, but also realized that she's the wife of Sakamoto, so it would be natural. He spoke to Amane and told him not to trust that woman, and that her husband was a psycho killer who enjoyed hurting people on trains, to which Sakamoto objected that it was only because Kashima wouldn't give up seats for disabled people. And he also spoke to Amane and said he didn't know what deal they had made, but they had used his daughter as leverage, so he angrily told him not to trust them. Kashima explained that revolution required some sacrifices, and this Aoi and her husband couldn't see the big picture. Amane's eyes widened at what he heard, and he asked if this was also what Kashima thought about JCC, to which Kashima remained silent. Amane said they had promised not to hurt anyone, so he wouldn't help them anymore if they were going to hurt people at the school. Kashima realized that Amane was indeed still a child, and he told Club Jam to take care of it now, and suddenly Kashima was replaced by Club Jam on their phone call. As soon as they switched, Club Jam suddenly clapped, and it seemed to have an effect on Amane, which puzzled Sakamoto. Club Jam said hadn't he told Kashima that he would handle the situation. Just as Sakamoto was about to call Amane to see if he was okay, he suddenly started swinging his multi-section staff while his face showed that he seemed to be out of it. After that, we returned to the present where the security system had been restored. Shin wondered what had happened here, while Akira pointed out that the alarm had gone off for about 10 seconds, so Seiba thought it was just a security malfunction while Satoda seemed to sense what was happening. Inside one of the classrooms, a student wondered what had happened and others thought the security had malfunctioned, and their teacher quieted them down because they were getting noisy asking what had happened. A student raised his hand and said there might be an intruder on their campus, so his sensei said the system was only gone for 10 seconds, so surely no one could have entered, which made one of his female classmates comment that boys were really stupid. However, it turns out that Kanaguri was already next to the boy who had spoken earlier, and he agreed with the girl and told this Yamada to be quiet because he was disturbing the students trying to learn. The boy was irritated with Kanaguri and seriously said his name was Yabuchi, so Kanaguri replied that he was just an extra so his name wasn't important, and now he should be quiet because he wanted to get candid footage of the class. The teacher then ordered Kanaguri to put away his camera, but he refused, so the teacher said that if that's the case, he should report to the staff room after class. Yabuchi noticed here that Kanaguri looked like the director of those murder films, so Kanaguri turned to him and arrogantly said that he had already watched his work, and because of that, he had good taste and he would put his name in the end credits. The teacher also approached Kanaguri and immediately grabbed his camera, ordering him to show it to him, which made Kanaguri's smile disappear. Kanaguri quickly took out his clapperboard and cleanly sliced the teacher's head while saying the word cut, and the cut was so clean that the teacher's head hurt when it fell to the floor, shocking the students. Kanaguri commented on how he was supposed to get the classroom footage he wanted without a teacher. Soon after, the students there started screaming in fear and began to run away, so Kanaguri tried to stop them and calm them down by saying he would be their teacher now. Because of this, the terrified and nervous students sat back down at their desks, and Kanaguri began to explain to them that expression in a movie is all in the details. The posture of an extra, the positioning of a prop, these things alter the realism on the screen. Creating that kind of vivid world is what makes the depiction of uncommon action effective. He noticed, however, that the students there seemed tense and were sweating nervously, so he told them that they were too stiff, and the scene was becoming unnatural. Suddenly, a projectile flew towards Kanaguri from outside the room, causing him to be thrown to the other side of the room. Someone spoke here saying something minutes, and that they had already seen the intruder in Lecture Hall 12. It turns out these were two JCC staff members, and one of them commented that it had been a while since he'd seen real action, and his companion added, with something like a bazooka, that they should make themselves look good in front of the students. Despite the solid hit of the projectile on Kanaguri, he still seemed okay, and he suddenly created a scene and called one of the men there Noda, saying he didn't think those would be his last words, so the man he spoke to shouted that his name was Inoue. On the other hand, we returned to Sakamoto and Amane, and Sakamoto was supporting Amane while asking if he was okay. He asked why he had cut the security, and while holding his head, Amane replied that he didn't know, but after the man on the screen, Club Jam, clapped, something suddenly happened to his memory. He nervously told him that he might have let some terrible people into JCC, so Sakamoto calmed him down and told him not to panic and asked if it was correct that they were after the database, and if so, that guy would prioritize information over massacre for now. Just as Amane was about to ask about the database, Shin suddenly arrived with Akira and Seiba, and he shouted that he had been looking for Sakamoto. Sakamoto was also surprised, and Shin said he had news, while Akira was bewildered on the side. Trembling, Akira couldn't believe that the beautiful woman in front of them was Sakamoto, so Shin said it was a disguise and he would explain it later, while Seiba was questioning what about the principles of physical matter. Sakamoto was speechless at their silliness and just asked what the news was, so Shin happily said that he had identified the database, and it was a nickname for a janitor who had been working at the school for a long time. Sakamoto was shocked when he learned this, and Amane was also surprised when he explained that he had an extraordinary memory where he remembered all the details of any student he had met, and it was data that couldn't be destroyed or lost. While Shin was suggesting they find him and ask if he had information about Slur, he noticed the reaction of the two and asked what the problem was. In Sakamoto's mind, he commented that this was heavy, while Amane was enveloped in nervousness and fear because he realized that the grandfather Shin was referring to was his own, and he wondered what he would do now because he was responsible for all of this. While thinking that if he didn't do anything, he would lose his grandfather too, Sakamoto said it was okay, and to leave it to them because anyone causing trouble on campus would be expelled. Amane turned to him and remembered what his grandfather had said about Sakamoto being by far the best fighter among all the students he had met. So he started to tear up and felt a sense of relief, and he asked them to save JCC and his grandfather. After that, we returned to Kanaguri's situation, and here he easily defeated the two JCC staff who confronted him, and he commented that everyone there was simply unsalvageable. He pointed out that a mere teacher was no match for a movie director, and he was irritated again because his cast had diminished once more and he couldn't shoot like this. Because of this, he decided to leave the classroom and look for a new theme, but as he left, he noticed something on the other side of the hallway, and it turned out to be Satoda. When he saw her, he seemed pleased and decided here that he would shoot a Japanese horror film next. Kanaguri began narrating, saying that at the end of the long corridor, one could see a middle-aged woman with a pale face resembling a ghost. Finally, the young man realized that her footsteps made no sound, causing him to raise his head in horror. The only audible noise was the surprisingly loud beating of his heart amidst the terrifying silence, and that's where the sound effect would be inserted. While holding the camera, he mentioned something about fear, but before he could finish his thought, Satoda suddenly appeared before him, pressing a blade towards him. Though he was struck, as evidenced by the blood spreading on the floor, he quickly stepped back and raised his clapperboard. It turned out he was cut on the shoulder, and Kanaguri said she interrupted the most crucial intro of the story. Satoda, unconcerned by this, grabbed him on the wrist, startling him. She threw him out of the building, even breaking a window. Nevertheless, he managed to land safely. Looking up, he was shocked to see that she had followed him, and they both fell into what seemed to be the school's greenhouse, shattering the ceiling. Satoda was on top of him, her blade aimed at his chest, which he blocked with the clapperboard. Now, Kanaguri claimed to remember who she was, Itsuko Satoda, the one who had refused an invitation to join the order, choosing to teach instead. He added that he had already made a movie about her, albeit fictional. Satoda couldn't believe that he was the scoundrel filmmaker creating movies about assassins' lives. She suggested that this could be the sequel. However, Kanaguri suddenly stood up to distance himself, refusing and saying he doesn't make sequels, which Satoda found disappointing. Kanaguri stated that the beauty of a film lies in encapsulating a soul within a 140-minute story. Satoda responded with a smile, saying she preferred Terminator 2, and attacked him again. She asked what his purpose was for coming there, and Kanaguri clarified things, saying he wasn't an assassin but a filmmaker. He claimed to have no killing skills or weapons, possessing only the abilities of a first-rate filmmaker. Suddenly, Satoda pulled Kanaguri's hand holding the camera, but was surprised to find it immovable. Kanaguri explained that when he's holding a camera, he doesn't allow it to shake. He moved behind her, adding that this was a first-rate tracking shot, then pointed the camera at her. The display panel showed the shot he had taken, saying he'd do a whip pan, then cut and used the clapperboard against Satoda. Meanwhile, as Sakamoto and Akira were running, they noticed an eerie silence and wondered if something frightening had entered within just 10 seconds. Sakamoto remarked that they were facing Slur's gang, so they couldn't underestimate them. Therefore, they needed to find and secure the database before the gang could reach it. Akira agreed, saying their first stop would be the janitor's room, although Shin and Seiba were near the incinerator. Sakamoto pondered this, but Akira assured him everything would be fine because Shin had a new weapon that made him even stronger. Moreover, Shin had also trained with Satoda, which was impressive. Sakamoto inquired about teacher Satoda, which made Akira curious if he knew her, mentioning how kind she was. Sakamoto smiled and said Satoda always put her students first. He described her as an unusual assassin who had helped him and Akao several times when they were students. Akira was pleased to hear this and expressed excitement about seeing her aunt again, hoping the database would know her whereabouts. Sakamoto paused, wanting to say something about Akao. However, he was interrupted when they heard reversed phrases about saying chocolate strawberry cake and candy butter cookie, followed by a clap over the speakers. Sakamoto was puzzled when Akira suddenly changed, as if hypnotized, repeatedly saying she would destroy the database. Sakamoto slapped her to bring her back to her senses. Akira, holding her cheek, asked what was happening. Sakamoto looked behind them to see dazed students repetitively saying they would find and destroy the database. They were walking like zombies, muttering nonsense. Sakamoto realized this resembled what happened to Amine earlier, indicating another enemy from Slur's gang. He urged Akira to hurry directly to the janitor's room, jumping over the walking students. They planned to take a shortcut through the poison department's greenhouse, to which Akira agreed. Moving to the broadcasting room, someone said that everyone was seduced by his sweet words, and when he clapped his hands, the world obeyed. This turned out to be Club Jam, who was lying down smiling while being stepped on the face and whipped with a rope. The man couldn't accept stepping on someone's head, while the woman was crying. Since Club Jam clapped his hands, their bodies no longer obeyed them, making them wonder what had been done to them. Club Jam sighed, saying he still couldn't feel anything, which puzzled the two. So Club Jam stood up, saying there was no thrill whenever he had acts of violence committed against himself. He admitted wanting to be subdued, to cry, and beg for forgiveness, then clapped. This surprised the two as they could move again. Club Jam said he was leaving to find real pain, something that would make his nerves throb. Hearing the speaker, Kanaguri knew Club Jam was on the move. Satoda, which was with him, was seen bloodied, but still standing while Kanaguri continued filming. He asked how many more times they needed to retake that scene. She replied it would take as long as necessary to protect her students and until his film was ruined. Suddenly, students entered where they were, still muttering about destroying the database. Satoda stopped the students, making Kanaguri smile. Meanwhile, Sakamoto and Akira continued running. Sakamoto was saying something about their plan after passing the greenhouse when he noticed Kanaguri attacking Satoda from the side. She seemed badly hurt and looked towards them at that moment. Akira and Sakamoto couldn't believe their eyes seeing her bloodied. In a flashback, a younger Satoda rejected an offer to become part of the Order, saying she had other plans. The man he was talking to responded that being in the Order was the pinnacle of being an assassin and, moreover, it paid well. While smoking, Satoda said there were 25 of them in class, but now only the 2 of them remained. People often died in that world, so she said they needed to start by changing education. Back in the present, the bloodied Satoda lay on the ground. She called out to Byodo, saying now they were one less. It was revealed that she had been talking to the janitor of JCC. Akira rushed towards her teacher, crying and in disbelief at what had happened. However, Kanaguri's camera was still focused on the scene. Akira entered the shot, and he curiously asked if she was now the heroine of his film. He commented that their reunion was a twist of fate befitting a protagonist. Kanaguri was pleased, saying his eyes hadn't failed him and that his decision to kill Satoda was correct because it produced a beautiful expression. Anger flashed in Akira's eyes at hearing this. Meanwhile, Sakamoto suddenly appeared behind Kanaguri. However, Kanaguri's reflexes were incredibly fast, and he dodged Sakamoto's attack. Akira noticed that Sakamoto's body had returned to normal, while Satoda weakened couldn't believe it was Sakamoto. She remarked that he had grown into a fine young man. Sakamoto replied long time no see to his sensei, noting that she hadn't changed a bit. Satoda then entrusted everything to him, and he agreed. Akira was sobbing, unable to accept what had happened. She desperately tried to wake Satoda, but she was no longer breathing. Akira asked Sakamoto what they should do, but he didn't respond. Satoda's eyes were open, and in Akira's grief, Kanaguri continued to film her, saying that her sensei was dead. He narrated how tears gently flowed down her cheeks while Sakamoto attacked him from behind again. However, Kanaguri quickly retreated, saying that unfortunately, he had no reason to film Taro Sakamoto now. Sakamoto retorted that he wasn't interested in B-movies anyway. Quickly, Sakamoto picked some flowers and blew them into Kanaguri's face. Kanaguri laughed, asking if he was supposed to be blinded by those dandelions. But Sakamoto suddenly jumped up towards a large cactus and kicked it towards Kanaguri. Once again, Kanaguri nimbly avoided the cactus spines, which shattered the floor upon impact. Kanaguri stated that the story of a former assassin living an ordinary life was worthless to film, then struck at Sakamoto. This action destroyed the greenhouse wall and cut Sakamoto's cheek. Sakamoto mentioned that he had seen him during the test and asked if he was in cahoots with Slur. Kanaguri couldn't accept this, saying it was just part of his project and he had only one goal. Sakamoto was curious about what that goal was. Kanaguri explained that his goal was to make a film about the conflict between JAA and Slur, filming from the Order's perspective. Sakamoto couldn't believe what he was hearing. Kanaguri added that as long as the film became a masterpiece, he didn't care who would win. He looked at Akira and told her not to worry, assuring her that she would have an important role. He explained that having an emotionally relatable heroine draws in viewers. He added that a story about a woman whose aunt was killed by Slur had a catchy ring to it. Akira was shocked to hear this. Judging by her expression, Kanaguri realized she didn't know what had happened to her Aunt Ryan. Sakamoto tried to stop him, but Kanaguri revealed that she had died because of Slur. Akira was visibly struggling to process this information. Suddenly, Satoda stood up and threw her weapon, targeting Kanaguri's left eye. This caused him to drop his camera. Akira was shocked to see Satoda rise again. Still bloodied, Satoda's action prompted Kanaguri to comment that rising from the dead to protect one student could be called Japanese horror. Despite having a blade in his eye, he still managed to smile at this turn of events. It was evident that Satoda had used her remaining strength to help her students, leaving Sakamoto in disbelief at his teacher's actions. Meanwhile, Shin, Seiba, and Amane were running. Sakamoto thought she should leave the rest of them, allowing Satoda to rest. At the same time, Akira was still in shock from Kanaguri's revelation that his aunt had been killed by Slur. Sakamoto called out to her, but Akira only asked if he knew about his aunt. Sakamoto apologized for not telling her, explaining that he had promised a cow to keep it secret. Akira was on the verge of tears, still unable to accept her death. Kanaguri interjected, saying he understood Akira's feelings. He mentioned hearing that Ryan Akao was an incredibly beautiful and talented assassin. Therefore, he found it frustrating that he had missed the opportunity to film her death. Once again, Akira's blood boiled at Kanaguri's words, prompting her to grab a weapon to attack, but Kanaguri blocked it. Despite Akira's determination to kill him, Kanaguri advised her not to rush to her demise, as she was an important performer. Suddenly, Kanaguri paused and considered the idea of cutting off Akira's arm, thinking that a one-armed beauty would make for a compelling character in a film. He was about to use his clapperboard on Akira when Sakamoto intervened to protect her. Surprised by this action, Kanaguri was shocked to see Sakamoto holding his camera. He couldn't believe his beloved camera was now in pieces. Stunned, he cried out in dismay, realizing he hadn't even retrieved the tape inside. He was frustrated by the loss of so much valuable material. However, After venting his frustration, Kanaguri calmed down. He then began contemplating what kind of script would lead to the heroine's despair. Suddenly, he was hit in the mouth with water because Sakamoto had aimed a hose at him, saying he's done messing with his sensei's school. Irritated, Kanaguri called Taro Sakamoto a nuisance, telling him to get out of his frame. The two faced off, and Sakamoto abruptly pushed Kanaguri, causing him to crash through the glass. It became apparent that they were on a higher floor, with students below, as their confrontation continued. Kanaguri still clutched his clapperboard while Sakamoto prepared to kick him. They ended up in the library, startling some of the occupants. Kanaguri landed safely and prepared himself. He searched for Sakamoto in the quiet library, where students were busy studying, oblivious to the unfolding events. Both being wet, they heard each other's footsteps and caught glimpses of one another between the displayed books. Despite being in separate aisles, Sakamoto threw a punch while Kanaguri kicked. A nearby student, wearing earphones while reading, remained oblivious to their altercation. Suddenly, Sakamoto grabbed Kanaguri by his scarf, pulling him to his side before forcefully throwing him straight towards the railing. The impact was so strong that the barrier shattered, leaving Kanaguri lying down with his arms dangling. He admitted to lacking motivation without his camera. Below, a student filling out a form noticed liquid dripping from above. Upon looking up, his companion also glanced and assumed it was a dead person. Instead of reporting it or seeking help, both students took out their phones to record the scene and share it on their social media stories. Noticing their cameras, Kanaguri smiled and seemed reinvigorated. He took their phones and sat on the students. He began exploring the device, mentioning that he had heard it was now possible to make movies using just a phone. He added that it was good to embrace new techniques occasionally, and if life gives you lemons, he should challenge himself as a director. Meanwhile, Sakamoto was peering through the library aisles searching for Kanaguri, realizing he might have thrown him quite far. However, Kanaguri suddenly wrapped his scarf around Sakamoto's face, pulling him while mentioning poor composition. He struck Sakamoto hard in the body, causing him to be thrown into the library's tables and chairs. Kanaguri looked at the phone and mentioned he had already drawn hundreds of millions of storyboards. Sakamoto wondered what had happened, as Kanaguri seemed to have become faster. Kanaguri attacked again, saying he could feel good composition in his bones. He claimed to know exactly what camera work was needed to succeed. Once more, Kanaguri struck Sakamoto in the face while the latter countered. Kanaguri aimed the camera at him, zooming in to show Sakamoto's puzzled face. Suddenly, Kanaguri hit the camera against his face, breaking his glasses and sending him flying again. Kanaguri remarked that if Sakamoto wanted to be the main character in his film, he should lose weight. He claimed that bodies making the audience uncomfortable were nothing but a distraction to the film. However, shock was evident on his face when he fell and got trapped between the library's bookshelves. Now, the skinny Sakamoto returned, saying that no matter how beautiful the cinematography, if the script is bad, it's just a one-star dud. Kanaguri couldn't believe that Sakamoto had gone to the extent of using special makeup because he was so desperate to be in his film, and once again aimed the camera at him. Kanaguri was impressed by Sakamoto's ability to change his body shape using special effects makeup. He commented that Sakamoto's actions were impressive and had captured his interest, but surprisingly, Sakamoto quickly approached him and prepared for a downward kick, something Kanaguri hadn't anticipated. Despite the powerful impact, Kanaguri managed to retreat, astonished by Sakamoto's speed. Sakamoto suddenly struck him in the face again, sending him flying into the middle of the bookshelves, which collapsed due to the force. Frustrated, Kanaguri complained that his camera couldn't keep up, preventing him from recording video. Meanwhile, a person at the front desk simply told him to be quiet in the library. As Sakamoto watched, Kanaguri approached the front desk and asked where the fisheye mode was on the phone, which was then pointed out to him. Consequently, he decided to film Sakamoto's death scene, adding that it would be non-fiction, of course. He suddenly asked if Sakamoto knew the difference between a masterpiece and a flop, causing Sakamoto to ponder. Kanaguri answered that the difference lay in whether or not he was the one filming it. Once again, Kanaguri held a spotlight in his left hand and a camera phone in his right, while Sakamoto prepared for what was to come. Meanwhile, We shift focus to Shin's team, who were still running. Shin wondered about the zombies behind them, who were students constantly muttering about destroying the database. This made Shin ponder why zombies always seemed to struggle with vocabularies. Suddenly, Saba blamed him for screwing up back there, which Shin couldn't believe as they continued running. Several minutes later, Shin was puzzled by the students marching in a mob. But based on Saba's observation, everyone had started behaving strangely after the weird broadcast earlier. Shin suggested they forget about that for now and focus on securing the database. The mob of students suddenly turned their attention to them upon hearing the word database, which confused the team. Consequently, the mob began chasing them. Amine mentioned there were two enemies, one being a hypnotist who had also affected him earlier. Saba found it interesting that they were recruiting fighters on site. The pursuing students now brandished weapons, declaring they would destroy the database. As they were being shot at, Shin confronted them, stating that while hypnosis is often seen on TV, everyone knows it's just an act. He quickly grabbed something to break into pieces and throw at the hypnotized students. When they were hit, Amine was surprised to see it work, snapping them out of their trance. However, other students continued to attack. Shin noticed the constant influx of students, while Amine hesitated, recognizing one of those trying to destroy the database as his friend. The friend attacked him, but Amine blocked it with his weapon. Shin questioned his passive response, to which Amine explained he was his friend. Shin became annoyed, saying this wasn't the time for such considerations. Suddenly, they were cornered at a railing that gave way, causing them to fall from a great height. Fortunately, Shin was caught by a mop and thrown to safety. It turned out to be the janitor who saved them, while others landed on a cloth suspended in the middle of the school. Amine and Shin initially thought they were about to die, but Byodo mentioned they had narrowly escaped as he closed the door. Amine called him Grandpa, causing Shin to realize that he must be the database. Byodo chuckled, saying it had been a while since he'd been called by that name. He explained that he was just a regular guy with a slightly better than average memory. Shin explained that Slur was pursuing him because he might have information Slur wanted to destroy. He pleaded with Byodo to share whatever he knew about Slur, as that was the reason he came to JCC. Byodo pondered upon hearing Slur's name and confirmed that he knew Yuzuki's secret, although he wasn't sure if the information would be useful. Shin insisted that it didn't matter. He just needed to know. Byodo agreed to tell him, but first, he asked for their help in driving the pursuers away from JCC, smiling as he held a gun. Amine became concerned, telling his grandfather to hide as he was the one they were looking for. He added that it was too dangerous, especially given his age. Nevertheless, Byodo managed to shoot the people chasing them after they broke down the door and entered. Shin and Amine were impressed. Byodo then told his grandchild that people who judge others based on appearances don't last long in this world. Amine was puzzled, suddenly noticing that the people his grandfather had shot seemed to have just fallen asleep. Shin confirmed with Byodo that after they defeat the enemies, he would reveal information about Slur. Byodo agreed, on the condition that they both survive. Shin concurred, but was about to say something else when he turned around and was surprised to find that Saba was no longer with them. The scene then shifts to the broadcasting room, where Club Jam was still present. It turns out Saba had gone there directly, wearing his invisibility suit. He knew he would find Club Jam there. Club Jam wondered who he was, and Saba explained that they were taking care of his younger sibling, so he asked where Mafuyu Saba was. Club Jam questioned what was in it for him if he answered. Saba proposed a deal. In exchange for the information, he would tell them the location of the database. Club Jam smiled at this suggestion, seemingly intrigued by the offer. Club Jam confirmed whether the deal was for him to tell about the database in exchange for information about his brother's whereabouts. He asked if he was referring to the black-haired kid wearing a face mask that Gaku had scouted. Because of this, Club Jam agreed but insisted on him sharing first. Saba then held out an SD card, claiming it's the database with all the students' information and no backups existed. Club Jam smiled and swiftly snatched it from his hand. He warned that if he joked once more he'd kill him. With incredibly fast movements, he managed to crush Saba's finger. He added that if he truly knew nothing, perhaps he should kill him. When Saba didn't respond immediately, he shook him, forcing him to choose. Seiba remained poker-faced, suddenly walking away and telling him to follow along. Meanwhile, Shin was irritated because Seiba had suddenly disappeared when they should have been working together. They continued running with Byodo to escape the zombie-like students who kept repeating that they would destroy the database. The three escaped by breaking the glass leading to the corridor. Shin struggled to determine the enemy's location by only reading the zombies' minds. At the back, Amine seemed distracted, so his grandfather smacked him on the head, telling him not to have second thoughts about fighting, even if they were his friends. Surprised by this, Amine asked if it meant he had to kill his friends. His grandfather replied that there were many ways to stop them without taking their lives. He added that he had noticed Amine holding back earlier. Amine was annoyed that his grandfather was lecturing him now, while he said he was too soft. He asked what Amine had learned in his 8 years at JCC, adding that if he became an enemy, Amine shouldn't hesitate to kill him, as that's what it takes to survive in their world. Amine couldn't respond and just called him an old bastard, while Shin glanced at him. Meanwhile, Seiba led Club Jam to a data storage facility, which pleased him as he found the place dark and exciting. Both were smiling, and it was unclear what they were thinking. Club Jam approached the shelves and saw many files and various documents stored there, but they were all under Natsu's name. This confused him, as they appeared to be personal documents of just one person. And so he pulled out something from the side and suddenly crushed it with his fist, saying it looked like Seiba wanted to have a painful death. He added that they were exactly alike, while sticking out his tongue. He was then puzzled when someone suddenly called him a dumbass. Club Jam noticed that no one was there, but there was a bullet hole where the voice calling him a dumbass had come from. As Seiba moved, strange particles shaped like small balls suddenly appeared in front of Club Jam. His feet suddenly froze, and he was immobilized where he stood. He was shocked when Seiba pressed a button and said checkmate. As a result, the ground beneath him shattered while Seiba mentioned that this was his domain. Club Jam suddenly grabbed onto the edge to avoid falling into the incinerator. However, Seiba stepped on his hand and forced him to speak about his brother's whereabouts. Club Jam just smiled, saying he was enjoying this. He was extremely happy to have followed Seiba, while he hadn't expected such a response from him. Club Jam added that it was more exciting than having a gun pointed at him to see a crackling incinerator beneath him. Again, Seiba questioned him, but instead of providing the requested information, Club Jam simply said that this feeling was what life was all about. The terror and pain while on the brink of death, he claimed, were the moments when they were most human. He just smiled and let go to clap his hands. Although his nose was bleeding, he pulled a chain attached to a ring on his middle finger. It turned out to be his weapon, a crescent-shaped blade attached to the chain. Seiba was shocked when Club Jam used his weapon to lift himself up and jump behind him. He moved incredibly fast, and as Seiba turned to face him, Club Jam slashed his arm, causing Seiba to fall in pain. Now it was Club Jam's turn to step on Seiba's hand. While wiping the blood dripping from his nose, Club Jam remarked how wonderful humans are, capable of achieving anything they set their minds to. He pointed his blade at Seiba's head, using Seiba's desire to escape the pain he was feeling as an example. Club Jam repeatedly whispered to Seiba that it didn't hurt until Seiba's mind seemed to go blank. Club Jam said it was working since the pain had disappeared. He explained that the secret to total brainwashing begins with subtle hypnosis. Because of this, Seiba's eyes remained steady as Club Jam mentioned that his brain now trusted Club Jam's voice, so he clapped again. He stated that their connection was now established. It seemed Club Jam had hypnotized Seiba and told him to tell the truth about whether he really knew where the database was. On the other hand, Shin, Amine, and Byodo were still running. Shin was surprised when he noticed someone suddenly attacking him. He stopped and fell because Seiba had attacked his hand while using his invisibility suit. When Seiba lifted his hood, Shin recognized him but paused when he noticed Club Jam behind him, who had figured out that there was the database. Seiba glared at Shin while Amine warned them to watch out for the person behind him, saying he was the one who hypnotized him and worked for Slur. Meanwhile, Club Jam asked if the old man was the database, to which Seiba confirmed. He then suddenly ordered Seiba to kill him. Shin quickly moved to shield Byodo when Seiba attacked. Shin couldn't believe Seiba had been hypnotized. so he told him to snap out of it while using his glove to land a powerful punch. Instead of hitting Seiba, the attack hit the wall because Seiba suddenly disappeared from Shin's sight due to his invisibility suit. Shin struggled to detect Seiba's location, remembering that Seiba had mentioned earlier that the hood he made was a brainwave blocking hood. He was extremely frustrated and didn't notice Club Jam suddenly jumping in front of him to go straight for the database. Shin was concerned about this and looked over, but Byodo blocked Club Jam's weapon with the mop he was holding. He remarked that he preferred just sitting in on lectures. His grandson came to the rescue, using his weapon and making his grandfather duck. He hit Club Jam, but instead of being hurt, he was delighted, which confused Amine. Club Jam seemed thrilled and thanked him. Shin checked on them, but Seiba was approaching him again. He sensed it and managed to dodge, but he thought to himself that his actions were limited using intuition alone. Seiba timed his attack perfectly, striking Shin's face with his hand, causing him to be thrown onto a table. As he fell, Shin noticed a spoon and fork that had fallen and grabbed them to use as weapons. With Seiba approaching again, Shin threw the utensils with great force, but Seiba quickly dodged. The two faced off, preparing with their respective weapons. However, as Shin was about to punch, he remembered the recoil of his gloves and the lag Seiba had mentioned when he gave them to him. Meanwhile, Seiba was targeting Shin's face directly. Shifting to a warehouse, someone asked when their companion would let go. It turns out Torimaru and Mafuyu were talking. Torimaru said that no one would rescue them if they just waited. She was sewing a Slur doll and mentioned how hot Slur was. Mafuyu was surprised at how quickly Torimaru switched sides and called her Ugo. Mafuyu said he had called his brother, so he would arrive soon. Torimaru couldn't believe this and asked if Mafuyu had a brother fetish and if they were close. Mafuyu replied that they weren't, as they didn't talk much. He said he hated his brother when they were young. Because of this, Torimaru was curious about why. Flashback to when they were children, Mafuyu was 5 years old while Natsuki was 9. Mafuyu said their parents were clueless, forcing them to train and play together. However, since his brother was 4 years older, he thought Mafuyu was just a pain and always left him behind. Torimaru laughed at this story and commented on how harsh it was. In situations like when Mafuyu was left alone crying in the forest, he thought that one day he would kill his brother. Torimaru said that was extreme, and because of that, she didn't think Mafuyu's brother would come. But Mafuyu clarified that whenever he was in danger, his brother always arrived. Torimaru's eyes sparkled at this, saying it was sacred love because his brother was totally looking out for him. But Mafuyu replied that his brother was just clever. On the side, Torimaru said Mafuyu was lucky and wished she had a brother too. In Mafuyu's thoughts, he said his brother Natsuki was late. Returning to the battle scene, Seiba stopped abruptly while holding his weapon, just as he was very close to Shin. Club Jam wondered why he had stopped, but suddenly Seiba asked him where Mafuyu was. He was impressed, realizing he was resisting his hypnosis, and thought to himself how twisted Seiba was. Nevertheless, he believed that once he started dreaming, there would be no waking up. So, he clapped again and whispered to Natsuki to kill him. Natsuki remained poker-faced while Club Jam smiled behind him. Because of this, Natsuki brought out his weapon while Shin prepared his fist, and they both struck Club Jam's body simultaneously. This caused them to knock down their opponent, surprising the grandfather-grandson duo. Natsuki remarked that Shin's ESP, or extrasensory perception, was handy, while Shin commented that Natsuki was a cheesy actor. Earlier, while they were facing each other, Natsuki had communicated with Shin mentally, telling him he would ask Club Jam about Mafuyu's whereabouts. If he knew, he would think of the answer. He added that once they got the answer, they wouldn't need Club Jam anymore. Shin was amazed, wondering when Natsuki had broken free from the hypnosis. Natsuki replied that he was never hypnotized, as hypnosis was all an act. Both the grandfather and grandson then hit him since Natsuki had almost killed Byodo. Amine said that although Natsuki might be his senior, he would kill him if he tricked him again. Natsuki replied that he would surely choose his own brother over someone else's grandfather too. With bumps on his head, Natsuki asked where his brother was. Shin answered that he was in an abandoned warehouse in Bangkok, and Slur might be there too. However, while Club Jam was lying on the floor, he he started clapping again, which puzzled everyone. This was apparently for Amine, who suddenly attacked them all with his weapon. Byodo couldn't believe what his grandson had done. Club Jam clarified that he had said once he hypnotized someone, there was no escape from him. So, he told Amine that he wanted to kill the 3 people in front of him so badly that he can't stand it. Suddenly, Amine saw 3 images of who he called Dad. Shin was shocked by this, while Club Jam stuck out his tongue and said it was his time to play. Therefore, prompted by Club Jam, Amine began swinging his weapon to fight them. Shin spoke to him, telling him to snap out of it, but in Amine's eyes, he saw his father in him asking what the problem was. Because of this, he struck at Shin, causing him to duck while Natsuki jumped to avoid the attack. The sharpness of Amine's weapon was evident as it cleanly cut through a nearby plant. Finally, Byodo realized that in Amine's perception, they appeared to be his father. Shin couldn't believe this and became curious about what had happened and why Amine harbored such intense hatred towards his father. Byodo revealed that Amine's father had killed his child, who was Amine's mother. Apparently, there was whole mess with the JAA, and due to Amine's extreme hatred for his father and the JAA, he wanted to eradicate them. Shin became worried while Club Jam just laughed. He remarked that of all types of pain, the most special was pain of the heart. Byodo became irritated by Club Jam's actions, rubbing salt in the child's wounds, and called him trash. Club Jam clapped again and said he wanted more abuse. Natsuki noticed that he had once again used self-hypnosis, so he warned Byodo, whom he called Gramps, to be careful. Nevertheless, Club Jam suddenly moved behind Byodo to behead him, but fortunately, Shin swiftly pulled him away to save him. Club Jam was puzzled by his move, while Shin thought that this vibe was similar to when he fought Shania during the test. He realized that even a small lapse could lead to death, so he decided not to waste time. Suddenly, someone grabbed his wrist. It was Natsuki, who noticed that his arm might be severely damaged by now. He added that he could only manage one more attack, because if he exceeded that, his entire arm would be destroyed. Meanwhile, Amine attacked again, which Shin managed to dodge while telling him to stop his bad jokes. He nearly got hit when he blocked Amine's weapon with his right arm. Luckily, he ducked to avoid the extremely sharp blade that would have struck his head. However, Club Jam approached Shin and said he wanted to play too, then positioned himself to attack. Nevertheless, Natsuki pointed a gun at Club Jam, saying that they would be the ones to play. He shot him in the back, causing him to shudder as he was electrocuted. Club Jam showed mixed emotions, claiming he had never been electrocuted before. Natsuki then told Shin to find a way, as he couldn't hold Club Jam off for long. This made Shin think, while Amine jumped to attack him again. Shin realized he only had one punch left that he could use with the glove, and he couldn't use it on Amine. He suddenly remembered the advice Byodo had given to his grandson earlier, that there were many ways to stop an opponent without killing them. Consequently, when Amine's weapon was about to hit him, Shin dodged and spun around. He used the technique Satoda taught him, using his hips as an axis to create a circular motion to deflect the attack. Satoda called this the rotation principle, and Shin applied it to Amine, pinning him to the ground. Shin then wiped the wound on his cheek, glad that he had paid attention in class. Meanwhile, on the ground, Amine called Shin a scumbag father and threatened to kill him while Shin couldn't believe Amine's strength. Suddenly, Byodo approached his grandson and told him he's got good memory like his. And so he urged him to remember what kind of father he had, which Shin found hard to believe. This prompted Amine to reflect on his past. He saw memories of being carried by his father as a baby. As he grew up, he learned to use weapons by watching his father, and whenever he showed his father a drawing, he was praised and patted on the head. However, a memory also surfaced of seeing his mother dead and bloody on the floor, with his father standing in front holding his weapon. Amine couldn't believe it, but his father just told him to forget everything. This caused Amine to snap out of it and recognize his grandfather in front of him. He mentioned his father, which caught Club Jam's attention while he was choking Natsuki. Club Jam wondered how the brainwashing had worn off. He released Natsuki and told Amine to behave, calling him his little puppet. Shin became concerned for Seiba while Club Jam spoke to Amine, telling him life was easier when controlled by others. However, Amine suddenly used his weapon to cut off Club Jam's right hand, which flew through the air. Seeing what happened to his hand, Club Jam smiled and prepared to counterattack. Tearfully, he said that because of the pain and suffering, he felt more alive than ever. Shin prepared his final punch using the glove, saying the fight was over and calling Club Jam a sick masochist. He directed the punch at Club Jam's stomach, sending him flying into the wall. The impact was so strong that it shattered the wall where he hit. Shin suddenly approached Saba and woke him up, telling him not to just lie there. Saba responded by asking for some sympathy, as he was an injured guy. He slowly got up and asked about the crazy masochist. Shin informed him that the fight was over because Amine had cut off the masochist's hand, rendering him unable to use his hypnosis. They were going to hand Club Jam over to JAA. While tied up, Club Jam regained consciousness and expressed delight, saying he enjoyed bondage play. Suddenly, Shin's head started to hurt, and Natsuki became concerned when he saw Shin lie down in pain. Shin thought to himself that he had overused his ability to read the future again. When Natsuki asked if he was okay, Shin told him not to talk to him for now. With his head bowed, Shin smiled and said that he and Sakamoto had managed to capture one of Slur's disciples. Natsuki suddenly approached Shin and held him from behind, telling him not to pretend he was fine. Shin retorted that he would kill Natsuki later for that. Meanwhile, Amine asked his grandfather about his father. He mentioned that he vaguely remembered some things about him, but didn't know why he had forgotten them until now. Byodo listened, and when Amine asked about the real reason he killed his mother, Byodo replied that he didn't know and that it would be better if Amine asked him that question. Amine agreed with this. Byodo thought to himself how ironic it was that the enemy who put Amine in that hypnotic state might be the reason his memories were being dredged up. He wondered where Yatsumura was and what he was doing now. Meanwhile, at the JAA Western Japan headquarters, someone reported that 46 JAA members had been confirmed dead. 3 assassination businesses were completely annihilated: the Sukiyaki Sizzler, Citrus Shop Sweetie, and Arashiyama Sappoji Murder Temple. In these 3 cases, the main perpetrator was believed to be one person, Satoru Yatsumura, who was kicked out of the order 8 years ago after attempting to assassinate JAA executives. As a result, there was a bounty on his head, and no one had seen him since. They currently believed he was hiding in Kyoto, but his connection to Slur was yet to be determined. This report was made to Fukamitsu, the director of JAA Western Japan headquarters. He felt bad because he used to frequent that sukiyaki place. Nagumo was also present, expressing envy that most JAA bases there were in restaurants. He had heard that members received discounts, which was correct. Fukamitsu stated that if they didn't act now, JAA Western Japan's profits would suffer. This was in addition to the many assassins quitting JAA out of fear of being assassinated. Consequently, when they couldn't cover job requests, they were allowing those gigs to go to other branches or overseas. As a result, the city was becoming dangerous due to the lack of a functioning assassin base. Fukamitsu's assistant responded that they seemed to be overreacting. Although Yatsumura was once part of the order, he was still just one assassin. Fukamitsu retorted that a single order member could easily wipe out an entire JAA branch, and they shouldn't underestimate him. Nagumo laughed and said it was fine, as they were there to prevent that from happening. The assistant became irritated, saying they were in this situation because they had allowed Yatsumura to escape 8 years ago. Nagumo sighed and said he understood, but then asked who had let him escape. The assistant quickly grabbed him and said that order members were limited to 10. In other words, you snooze, you lose. He said Nagumo was lucky to hold on to a spot there, but added that they had many assassins on his level. Suddenly, the assistant's head was split in half, causing him to collapse to the floor. Fukamitsu stopped Nagumo, telling him not to desecrate their holy hall with his bloodlust, and called him an idiot. Nagumo was puzzled by the mention of bloodlust and laughed. Fukamitsu added that he understood if Shishiba blows it again, but before he could finish, Nagumo interrupted, saying it was for the order and that he understood it was his job. As Nagumo was leaving, he said that if the man lying on the floor were to wake up, he should be told that while it's true that the order is limited to 10 members, the roster has never been full. There were many spots available, so if he wanted one, he was welcome to try to enter the roster. Meanwhile, a man wearing a hat was walking with a woman in a kimono in Japan. The man maintained a poker face. Shishiba had been waiting for them in that location. He apologized for disturbing them, especially since the man was with a beautiful woman, but according to JAA regulations, he had to kill them for committing and assisting in systemic violence against JAA. The pair stopped, and the woman laughed at Shishiba's statement about killing them. She sarcastically said it was scary and asked him to have mercy on them. The man responded that the role suited Shishiba even more than it suited himself in the order. Shishiba replied it was a lot of work. He then asked the man, whom he called Mr. Yatsumura, about his goal, curious if he was working for Slur to wipe out JAA. Yatsumura answered that he is not working with others. Once JAA was gone, he'll be able to look his family in the eye again. Shishiba mentioned Amine, asking if he was 13 or 14 now. He commented that it was the rebellious stage, and at that age, he surely wouldn't want to see Yatsumura. Yatsumura laughed, saying that talking to Shishiba like this brought him back to the past. On the night he failed his mission, and came to him like that. Shishiba replied that he couldn't let it slide this time. Considering his position, Yatsumura said he could just cry, adding that if he hadn't saved him from the streets, he'd probably just be nothing but a normal thug now. Yatsumura then drew his weapon and asked if Shishiba had forgotten who gave him the scar on his chin. Suddenly, someone attacked Yatsumura from the side, sending him flying into the wall of a nearby building and through several streets. The impact was so strong that he was thrown quite far. Shishiba responded that he was too stupid to remember, and besides, he had dropped out of school after all. The person responsible for the attack was Osaraji, using her buzz saw weapon. She spoke to Shishiba, saying that when they were done, she wanted to eat tofu. Shishiba was surprised by her request for something healthy for once and mentioned he knew a place for that. Meanwhile, despite being thrown so far, Yatsumura was seen sitting calmly, his hat still in place, as if nothing had happened. Flashback to the past, Yatsumura told Shishiba that he had made a mess. But Shishiba told him to shut up and said if he was going to kill him, he should just do it quickly. Yatsumura offered to let him live. Shishiba was surprised by this statement, while the room was filled with many slain bodies. Yatsumura added that he had other work to do and asked if Shishiba wanted to join him. When Shishiba questioned why, Yatsumura answered that he was understaffed, thanks to a certain someone. However, Shishiba said he wasn't suited to working under someone else, but Yatsumura replied that it wasn't for him to decide. The key to being at peace in their world, he said, was to surround oneself with people who he were okay with dying. And so Shishiba asked about the hourly wage, to which Yatsumura replied it was commission-based. Back in the present, Yatsumura wielded his weapon to attack Osaraji and Shishiba, who managed to dodge. He approached them and commented on how lively the woman was, asking Shishiba if she was his kohai or junior. Shishiba apologized, saying he should have had her greet him properly and that she was shy around others. Osaraji apologized as well. Yatsumura remarked that it was difficult having an assistant who didn't listen. Shishiba smiled, saying he'd make sure to talk to her about not finishing him off with the first hit. Yatsumura then struck at Shishiba's face again, but he managed to jump away while holding a hammer. Meanwhile, Osaraji attacked Yatsumura, but an umbrella suddenly blocked her. It belonged to Yatsumura's geisha companion. Impressively, even though Osaraji's buzz saw hit the umbrella, it remained intact. The geisha said it wasn't necessary and suddenly sent Osaraji flying, surprising the people walking nearby. However, Osaraji managed to land safely. The geisha chided Yatsumura for only paying attention to the young ones, to which he apologized. She then closed her umbrella, revealing it to be a gun, and fired at Osaraji, who escaped. After that, the geisha reopened her umbrella and leaped towards Osaraji. When she moved the umbrella's handle, blades appeared around it. While in the air, she released these blades directly at Osaraji, who blocked them with her buzz saw. Osaraji quickly retreated and boarded a parked rickshaw. When the driver asked where she was going, she pointed in a direction. They headed off in that direction while the geisha said that riding in the rickshaw looks fun. Meanwhile, Yatsumura said he was moved, which confused Shishiba. He explained that when he first picked up Shishiba, he thought he had potential to become an assassin. He asked if Shishiba knew what it took to be a good assassin. Shishiba replied that it was either a fanatical belief in killing or no belief at all. Yatsumura was surprised that he had already told him this. Shishiba commented that it was sad when old people repeated themselves. Yatsumura added that assassins with mixed feelings about killing get caught up and die before they realize it. But those with a simple mindset don't hesitate, which makes them stronger. Shishiba wondered why old people always wanted to discuss their theories, imagining how they felt having to listen politely to their rambling. But Yatsumura commented that he was as cold as usual. Suddenly, someone attacked Shishiba from the side, but he managed to block it. A man with glasses appeared, holding sharp objects between his fingers. Shishiba noticed that Yatsumura had a friend there. The man threw what looked like a sharp Japanese hairpin at Shishiba, which he blocked with his hammer. However, a part of it broke off, causing an explosion. Shishiba jumped up to the ceiling of a building, followed by the man. The man told Yatsumura not to interfere, as they could handle these young ones. He continuously attacked Shishiba, who managed to block everything thrown at him. Someone else jumped from a higher part straight at Shishiba, hitting him with a large barrel. The impact was so strong that the ceiling collapsed, and they fell into a store where customers were eating dango. Shishiba hit the ground hard, but to their surprise, he was gone instantly. He quickly moved behind the two attackers. He used his hammers to behead them, commenting that they should improve their neck strength. The customers and the waiter were shocked. He asked Shishiba to avoid violence inside the shop, but Shishiba just took a stick of dango, ate it, and then stabbed the stick into the waiter who had drawn a knife to attack him. As Shishiba left the shop, he praised their delicious product and paid for it. Just as he was about to exit, he sensed something on the other side and prepared himself. His suspicion was correct, as Yatsumura was waiting to attack him with his weapon. Although Shishiba was hit on the cheek, he said they would start with one blow. He managed to hit Yatsumura in the face, tearing his mouth to his cheek. Because of this, Yatsumura regretted not killing Shishiba back then. On the other hand, Osaragi's rickshaw puller started complaining, and she felt sympathy for him. Suddenly, she noticed a double-decker bus on the road. The geisha who uses an umbrella as a weapon was riding on it. She commented on how elegant it was to choose a rickshaw, while the passengers on the bus, who looked like tourists, were delighted and asked if they could take a picture with the geisha. However, the geisha suddenly attacked Osaragi again, who blocked it using her weapon as a shield. The driver was shocked by their violence. The geisha asked Osaragi not to glare at her like that. She felt bad knowing it was difficult for her to fight in the city with such a large weapon. She then descended to the lower part of the bus and said it's better to ride inside, especially since it's getting cold. Meanwhile, a man sitting in the back noticed the geisha and took a photo. Because of this, she threatened him not to take pictures without consent, or else she'd kill him. She grabbed him and pointed her umbrella at him, which puzzled the man. Surprisingly, from across the street, Osaragi struck her with her buzz saw, causing the geisha to be thrown out of the bus and against the sidewalk railing. The passengers inside the bus were startled when they saw the window suddenly shatter and a rope hanging. The geisha jumped onto the ceiling of a rickshaw carrying two passengers and told Osaragi that she was causing a disturbance there. Because of this, Osaragi became worried, saying that Shishiba would surely be angry again. The geisha wondered why. In a flashback to when they had fought an opponent at a temple, Shishiba had told her not to make a mess in the city and to kill quietly because normal people get disturbed when they see corpses. Back in the present, Osaragi said that normal people have the right to a happy life, so they shouldn't involve them in their world anymore. The geisha paused before replying that because of what she said, it made them sound abnormal, and that was hurtful. Meanwhile, the rickshaw puller was struggling because the load had become extremely heavy. The geisha added, asking who Osaragi was to judge other people. She claimed that deep within every person, there's a desire to live and an urge to kill. She questioned why they should forgive people who cause others to suffer simply by being alive, and why only the act of killing is condemned. Osaragi was puzzled by this statement and asked when they had ever been forgiven. The geisha fell silent, a vein visibly protruding under her eye in response. Switching to Yatsumura, he remarked that Shishiba have it pretty rough. He said that if Shishiba was paired to a beautiful woman, it would mean that JAA was truly short-staffed. Shishiba was surprised by this comment. He mentioned how Yatsumura just said that a strong belief in killing was necessary to become an assassin and wanted to tell him something. The idea of giving guns to maniacs, he said, was extremely old-fashioned. Returning to the girls, Osaragi prepared herself as she noticed the geisha attacking her head-on, causing the rickshaw she was riding to be destroyed. The geisha pointed her umbrella at her and said Osaragi's face was very delicate, so she fired her weapon at her. However, Osaragi saved herself by retreating into what seemed to be a tea house. The window of that place was shattered due to their intrusion. While a song played in the room, the geisha suddenly pulled a folding divider from the side and struck Osaragi with it. The geisha sat on top of her and repeatedly stabbed her with her umbrella, but she was surprised when she suddenly couldn't pull her weapon back. Meanwhile, Shishiba mentioned that the trend for assassins now was leaning towards young girls with circular saws who grew up on farms. Back to the fight, Osaragi was actually holding the tip of the geisha's umbrella, preventing her from pulling it back. Like a scene from a horror movie, Osaragi peeked through the hole made by the geisha, startling her. So, the geisha stood up, and Osaragi threw her buzz saw in a powerful spinning motion to hit her, causing her to be flung out the window. The geisha couldn't believe Osaragi's impressive strength despite her petite frame. None of the theories of killing could be applied to this situation because it was like fighting a large beast. So, she decided to escape first to save herself. Pedestrians on the side noticed the geisha jumping onto the ceiling. She ran very fast, thinking they were at a turning point in history and that JAA was about to be crushed. When that happens, she thought she could kill as much as she wanted. Suddenly, a rope coiled around the belt of the geisha's robe. She wondered when this happened, and upon looking, she saw it came from Osaragi's weapon. She had covered herself with fabric to avoid being noticed by people around. Suddenly, she started her saw, pulling the tied-up geisha towards her. The geisha was surprised because when she opened her eyes, they were inside the fabric with Osaragi in front of her, signaling her to be quiet. Outside, civilians could be seen walking by. Inside the fabric, Osaragi cut the geisha's throat, who complained that it wasn't fair. And because it was hot inside and she had completed her mission, Osaragi crawled out of the fabric, leaving the geisha's bloody body inside. Switching back to the other side, Yatsumura laughed. Shishiba asked what was so funny. While they were fighting, Yatsumura couldn't believe that Shishiba was still using old hammers as weapons, but he said that shouldn't come from him. Shishiba added that hammers were the best because they could hit or gouge. Yatsumura continued, saying they also never run out of ammunition and don't need sharpening. Shishiba agreed. That was exactly the kind of thinking Yatsumura expected from someone at the tip of the spear. Shishiba commented that Yatsumura was out of touch. He said his kohai was now like that. He added that he preferred simplicity and didn't want to think too much or be weighed down. He told Yatsumura that the extra he was carrying was too heavy. Yatsumura paused and flashed back 8 years ago. Shishiba had told Yatsumura that it was ridiculous for him to have a family, especially since he was an assassin. While sitting at the dining table, Yatsumura said that was just a stereotype of his job and asked him to come in. Shishiba wondered what had happened to Yatsumura's advice that the key to peace in their world was to surround oneself with people one was okay with dying. After a while, they sat in the living room, and Yatsumura spoke to him. He said the key to surviving in that world was the dedication to protect what one valued. Yatsumura's wife then called their child to play with him, but he refused. Meanwhile, Shishiba said that Yatsumura was the right-hand man of the chief. So basically, he was number 2 in JAA. This meant he had many enemies. That's why Shishiba couldn't believe Yatsumura had a child. However, Yatsumura's wife suddenly moved behind him and held a knife to his throat, saying she was also a pro. She added that it was time for their child to sleep, so he shouldn't overstay his welcome. Shishiba was shocked by her rudeness. Because of this, Yatsumura apologized to his wife, Shino, and offered to drive Shishiba home. During the drive, Shishiba commented that Yatsumura had a messed up taste in women, but Yatsumura warned him to be careful about what he said about his wife. Shishiba was curious about her attitude, to which he simply replied that's just how she was. He asked if Shishiba would laugh if he said he fell so hard for her that he really worked to win her over. Shishiba was surprised that now he had to listen to his boss talk about his love life in the car. But Yatsumura said he'd understand one day. When a man meets a woman and loves her despite her flaws, it's all over for him. Shishiba was disgusted by the topic and requested to be dropped off there. Speaking of which, Yatsumura asked that if anything happened to him, Shishiba should watch over his family. But he replied that he was asking the wrong person for a favor. And so Yatsumura commented that's cold of him. Shishiba added that if anything happened to Yatsumura, it might mean he was dead too. Yatsumura denied this. He said there was something going on in the high ranks of JAA. A renegade group was planning to assassinate their chief. Shishiba responded that JAA wasn't a monolith after all. Yatsumura had a direct order from the chief to find and kill the conspirators. Shishiba couldn't believe how casually he was mentioning this and asked what if he was one of the traitors. Yatsumura knew Shishiba didn't care who was in charge, and Shishiba agreed. Yatsumura said some of the JAA leaders might be involved, and he could be a target too. Because of this, Shishiba was annoyed, saying it was a hassle and he'd pretend Yatsumura hadn't told him. But he pleaded with him again. On another day, the duo was seen in the park with Yatsumura's son, Amine. Yatsumura went to the lotto to gather information, and when he checked the scratch card, he was shocked by what he learned. The conspirators had been identified, and their plan was to assassinate the chief at 3 a.m. at JAA headquarters. Therefore, Yatsumura's mission was to kill the conspirators and stop their plan. Switching to their house, Yatsumura spoke to his wife, Shino, while getting coffee. He said he'd be leaving for a while and wouldn't be having dinner there. When she asked if it was work, Yatsumura said yes. While busy with chores, Shino spoke out that he could work while she was just at home. She said she wanted to return to work too, or else she'd lose her skills. He replied not to worry because once this job was finished, he'd take time off. He suddenly called their son, Amine, and gave him a gift, a weapon, knowing he wants a 3-section titanium staff. But instead of being happy, Amine said no thanks. He suddenly demonstrated skillful use of the gift and then threw it aside. He said he now wanted a 4-section staff because he was tired of the 3-section kind. Yatsumura couldn't believe what he did and said it was sad how fast they grow up. Shino said that Amine idolized him, and so he'd practice it every day. During their conversation, Shino noticed something on the table. It was the scratch card Yatsumura got from the lotto shop. This seemed to trouble her. Yatsumura put on his coat and said goodbye, asking her to lock the door after he left. But he was puzzled when Shino didn't respond, and when he looked for her, he found her holding their child with a knife pointed at him. Shino pleaded with Yatsumura not to take that mission, or else she'd kill their son, Amine. The child appeared to be asleep or unconscious in his mother's arms. Yatsumura couldn't believe what she was doing and said if she was joking, it wasn't funny. She replied that she had waited for so long, and finally, she could fulfill her purpose. Yatsumura was bewildered, asking what purpose she meant. He asked her to let Amine go, but Shino was serious about her threat. She admitted she worked for the people Yatsumura was targeting in tonight's mission, asking if he understood. But Yatsumura asked for clarification. Shino explained that because Yatsumura was the chief's right-hand man, he was in their way. So they needed leverage against him, which was Amine, whom he cherished most. She threatened again that if he moved, she'd kill Amine, and if he tried to contact others, she'd kill him too. She said he'd stay in their house until the JA chief was dead. Yatsumura asked why it had come to this, and why she hadn't just killed him from the start. Smiling, Shino replied that how could they do that when he was so skilled. She hugged Amine and said she was happy to have married him and had a child. Because of this, she could serve the revolution. She thanked him for being naive. Because of this, Yatsumura sighed, reaching for his weapon. He said many people underestimate fathers. He asked if she thought taking their son hostage evened things out. But again, Shino repeated that if he moved, she'd slit Amine's throat. In an instant, Yatsumura was beside his wife, having already attacked her. He said when a pro moves, it goes unnoticed. At that moment, Amine woke up and saw what had happened. Several hours later, Yatsumura was surprised that someone had found him. It was Shishiba, who asked what he had done. Just a short while ago, He said their chief had been assassinated and an executive had been appointed as the new CEO. He's raising a ruckus because the new CEO was saying that Yatsumura had killed the chief. So, Shishiba asked what the deal was. Now, the JAA has put a hit on his head because he had killed the chief. In his mind, he thought he had been framed because they wanted to remove the former leaders of the JAA, but he only asked Shishiba if he was there to assassinate him. Shishiba replied that the truth was, he didn't finish his sentence as Yatsumura told him not to ask any more questions since he taught him not to learn too much about the enemy. Shishiba paused and agreed. They shouldn't think about the reason for the killing until it was a done deal. Back to the present, the two were on the roof, continuing their fight. They attacked each other repeatedly, and after a while, Yatsumura caught Shishiba's hammer, which surprised him. His weapon was thrown away while Shishiba tried to avoid Yatsumura's staff. Yatsumura said Shishiba should not look so bored, but he replied that this was just how he looked, telling him not to be mean. Yatsumura added that if he had no goals or beliefs, he should at least try to enjoy his job, or else he wouldn't last long. Yatsumura then jumped very high and came down directly at Shishiba, causing them to crash through several floors of the building they were in. The impact was so strong that they shattered the ceiling and beams of each floor. Meanwhile, Shishiba blocked Yatsumura's weapon and said that killing was like cleaning house for him, and there was nothing fun about it. He used the hammer in his right hand to hit Yatsumura, causing him to be thrown to the ground floor where there were people. He was thrown off inside the channel of rebirth where there were two people outside talking about passing through there, but one refused because it was too dark. Nevertheless, Shishiba was seen entering and paying the entrance fee for two adults. He saw the stairs and went down to a dark hallway. Shishiba thought to himself that Yatsumura was baiting him, so he prepared his hammers while walking down the corridor. It was very dark at the end, but he continued walking inside, focusing on his surroundings. Suddenly, Yatsumura emerged and attacked Shishiba with his 3-section staff, but Shishiba managed to block it with his hammers. The two faced off in the dark hallway, exchanging attacks. Outside, many people were watching a performance, and some were disturbed when they heard a strange noise. The two fighters suddenly burst through a shattered wall onto the stage where a performance was taking place. Shishiba was troubled because it was a no performance, and they didn't have traditional sandals for it. Meanwhile, the audience wondered if this was how a no performance typically went, with some finding it cool. Shishiba scanned the area, looking for where Yatsumura had gone. A narrator spoke, saying that the Imperial Palace seemed to be rising into space, and there was no time for the Thunder God to vibrate. Because of this, the incarnation of Thunder appeared, and a masked man emerged beside Shishiba. He attacked Shishiba who, despite having his back turned, managed to block the weapon. Yatsumura, the one in costume, said, Shishiba possessed the qualities of an assassin. If not for his attitude, he would have reached a higher rank by now. Shishiba replied that he wasn't interested in that. He only wanted things to be nice and clean. He was content as long as he lived in a world that was tidier than the day before. Suddenly, he thought of Amine and said people were strange. He added that there were things that could only be found in a messy room. He threw his staff, which managed to slice part of Shishiba's hand, cutting off 2 of his fingers. Yatsumura then took off his robe and threw it at Shishiba to obstruct his view, then stabbed at him. Yatsumura said he knew that when he returned, he would have to fight him. He asked if Shishiba blamed him for choosing his family, but Shishiba replied that he didn't blame him, which surprised him. Shishiba saw his reflection in the hammer that had fallen along with his fingers, while the robe Yatsumura had used earlier was blocking his view. He couldn't believe Shishiba had used the hammer as a mirror. Even with missing fingers, Shishiba managed to grab his other hammer to strike at Yatsumura and attack. He said he's had enough, and his patience had run out. Every time they faced each other, Shishiba grew tired of trying to find reasons to kill him. Meanwhile, the spectators were leaving, amazed by the earlier performance, although some commented on how grotesque it was. Yatsumura had plunged into the water, and Shishiba threw his weapon at him. He said everything now depended on luck. Yatsumura's body sank beneath the water, unable to resurface to save himself. He recalled the past when he was playing with his son, working with Shishiba, and living with his wife. His eyes were slowly closing as he saw the sunlight through the water. However, someone suddenly pulled his body from there. Because of this, he coughed up the water he had swallowed. He asked what he thought he was doing, and it turned out to be Nagumo who had pulled him out. They were on a boat, and Nagumo replied that he was lucky to be found by him. He said that with all the bleeding, Yatsumura might have died if he hadn't retrieved him. Yatsumura couldn't believe what Nagumo had done and asked what his intentions were. Nagumo proposed a deal, saying that the assassin world had been pretty chaotic lately. He thought it would be handy to have a living corpse. While lying down, Yatsumura asked what he meant. Nagumo said he wanted him to investigate the death of a friend of his within the JAA. Since Yatsumura was formerly number 2 in the JAA, he surely had connections and the brutality. Yatsumura confirmed if Nagumo wanted to fake his death and make him his soldier, but he asked what would happen if he refused. Nagumo laughed and threatened to kill his son, Amine. Yatsumura paused and became angry at this, but Nagumo added that in exchange, once he completed the mission, he would arrange for Yatsumura to live with his son Amine. Yatsumura admitted that since he was in the order, he had thought Nagumo was a creep, but he didn't expect him to be this bad. But before anything else, he wanted to know who Nagumo was working for. Nagumo just smiled and said that corpses don't talk. Yatsumura got annoyed and called him a smart-mouthed punk. Back at the other side, Osaraji received a call from someone saying he's done. It was Shishiba, who wanted to meet up with her, but he couldn't believe she was already in Arashiyama and said she had abused the rickshaw puller too much. When he asked if she still wanted to eat tofu, someone suddenly tapped him. Noticing it was Nagumo, he put down the phone and said he'd call back in a minute. Shishiba asked where Nagumo had come from, and he replied that he'd stopped by to say hello at the Kyoto HQ, then asked if Shishiba was done. Shishiba nodded, saying everything was okay. Nagumo laughed, saying it was impressive that he had defeated Yatsumura. Shishiba just replied whatever, saying it was impossible for that old man to beat him. Nagumo confirmed if he really killed him. Shishiba, annoyed at Nagumo's persistence, asked what he had said, but Nagumo admitted he had seen Yatsumura near the Kamogawa River. Shishiba seemed surprised that he wasn't dead yet, but Nagumo told him not to make him laugh. He asked when had it ever happened that an order member didn't make sure an enemy was truly dead. He said Shishiba had lied. Because of this, Shishiba remained silent. Nagumo spoke of concealing a fugitive and destroying evidence. According to JAA law, neglecting to finish off a dying enemy was equivalent to treason against the organization and punishable by death. Shishiba looked at him and asked if he was going to purge him. He said it was fine and he'd be happy to fight him. The two stared at each other seriously, but suddenly Nagumo laughed, saying he was just joking. He said he was just kidding because he wouldn't purge a friend. He said he caught Shishiba there and kept laughing. Shishiba was irritated and seriously wanted to fight Nagumo, saying he'd like to clobber him at least once. Nagumo said he really did see Yatsumura at the edge of the Kamogawa River, but told Shishiba not to worry because he was now a corpse. Shishiba turned away, seemingly troubled by the confirmation of Yatsumura's death. Anyway, Nagumo said it was a relief, because if Shishiba had committed treason, they would have lost 2 from the order. Shishiba was surprised by this, and Nagumo explained that Kanaguri had been expelled. He was now wanted for concealing evidence from the JAA and was suspected of colluding with X. The order was to kill on sight. Shishiba couldn't believe and said Osaraji would be pleased when she found out. At another place, someone was narrating that he once had a good friend with whom he always played hula hoop. But one day, they had a fight over the topic of what makes the greatest movie. Because of this, the battle became fierce. It turns out Kanaguri was the one telling this story inside a theater to Sakamoto. Kanaguri mentioned this person was a professional assassin, but his passion for cinema prevailed. To atone for this person's death, he had taken over his seat in the order, but it seemed that was over now. When he tried to log into the JAA account, he couldn't access it and thought he had been removed. Sakamoto pulled out his ballpen from his pocket and said it was impossible for a freak like him to be in the order. Kanaguri threw his phone and said he thought about asking Sakamoto about his favorite movie before killing him, but remembered he didn't like talking to others about cinema. Sakamoto replied not to worry, because he didn't like movies. Sakamoto clicked his pin and charged at Kanaguri, who countered with his weapon. Kanagori said he heard there were movies in heaven too, and he was sure Sakamoto would learn to like them there. But Sakamoto replied that assassins don't go to heaven. When Kanagori was young, he had a favorite movie that he watched repeatedly until the tape was worn out. Nevertheless, its beautiful and exciting world never faded for him. He was so moved by what he watched that he even cried. Kanagori was only 10 years old then, and he dreamed of visiting the places he saw in the movie. So, one day when he grew up, he actually went to that place. However, when he saw it in person, it seemed unremarkable. In his mind, it looked more vibrant in the black and white movie he had watched. He wondered why other countries, nature, people, and even death seemed more powerful in films than in real life. Back to the present, on stage, Kanagori continues to attack Sakamoto with his weapon. Sakamoto asked if it was a high-density laser, which made Kanagori laugh. He said it was just light, but he did have a custom-made one because he didn't like filming with standard versions. He pointed his weapon at Sakamoto, and light could be seen passing through his body. As a result, Sakamoto's pin and clothes melted. Kanagori was curious about why Sakamoto insisted on blocking his way. He asked if it was really important to protect the database and the student extras, or if he was just trying to avenge his favorite teacher. He told Sakamoto to listen to him, saying that everything in the world exists for cinema, including the death of their loved ones. The universe, he claimed, was created to be a giant movie set, and people were born to be actors in films. Satoda was an opportunity to film touching material about a teacher willing to die for her students. If Sakamoto interfered, he would ruin the story. He asked if he understood that. Kanagori added that he would create a scene for Sakamoto next time, and so he shouldn't let his impatience disregard the death of the teacher, Satoda. Suddenly, Sakamoto punched the wall on the stage, causing the organ pipes placed above to fall. He declared that a heartless person like Kanagori would never touch others' hearts. Sakamoto used the pipes as weapons, throwing them at Kanagori. However, Kanagori skillfully avoided them. He commented that Sakamoto's attacks were sloppy, asking if he was losing his temper. He added that if Sakamoto rejected films based on their creator, he'd never encounter good movies. Kanagori then leapt behind Sakamoto and aimed his light at him. But instead of hitting Sakamoto, Kanagori was struck by his own weapon. Puzzled by this, he noticed that the light had bounced off the pipes Sakamoto had thrown earlier. Kanagori couldn't believe Sakamoto had planned this all along. The light reflected off the pipe Sakamoto was holding, and Kanagori was amused, saying it was interesting, like the movie Entrapment. While dodging the lights around him, Sakamoto kicked Kanagori, who used his clapperboard in defense. Kanagori's back was smoking, and he was shocked that his clapperboard had hit his light, causing part of it to break. He then remarked that Sakamoto was surprisingly fun. Catching Sakamoto's fist as he punched, Kanagori said that unfortunately, the era of live-action stunts ended with Jackie Chan. This caught Sakamoto off guard. Kanagori added that, legendary assassin or not, an action actor is just an action actor. The trajectory of each move was very predictable, he claimed. In response to this, Sakamoto said he'd show Kanagori something he hadn't experienced before, 4DX. He grabbed Kanagori by the wrist, pushed him to the edge of the stage, and kicked him forcefully. As a result, Kanagori was sent flying high due to the force of Sakamoto's kick. Not content with that, Sakamoto struck Kanagori's face with a pipe, causing him to hurtle through the chairs and crash into the theater's back wall. The wall cracked from the impact. Kanagori wondered how Sakamoto, who had retired years ago, could still be this formidable. The shadows of the two could be seen on the stage as they fought. Sakamoto unleashed a barrage of punches, making Kanagori ponder why his movements were so fast that even his lens couldn't keep up. He thought this action surpassed cinema, and he didn't know such a guy existed. While hunched over, Kanagori was excited, thinking he should capture this scene. This, he thought, was why he loved movies. He opened his arms wide as Sakamoto leapt into the air. Mid-air, Sakamoto took a deep breath and blew into the pipe he was holding, striking Kanagori. This sent Kanagori flying back onto the stage, crashing into the organ. Sakamoto told him to stay in his fictional world, saying,
"Hasta la vista, baby."
Bloodied, Kanagori remarked that Sakamoto did like movies too. He struggled to stand up, So Sakamoto approached him and said the fight was over. He told Kanaguri he'd hand him over to the JAA, urging him not to cause any more trouble. Kanaguri asked if Sakamoto knew what the most boring type of movie was. He answered that it's the kind where the protagonist wakes up and realizes it was all a dream. But he corrected him, saying the truly boring movie is one where you can predict the ending halfway through. Kanaguri added that it's disgusting when jerks keep making movies with obvious endings. Meanwhile, Sakamoto noticed something wasn't right. Kanaguri continued to explain that, of course, there needs to be a pattern, like achieving resolution by defeating the enemy. But Sakamoto then realized Kanaguri's blood was unusual. Kanaguri touched his wound, saying the important thing is how to deceive the audience, then wiped the blood from his lips. That was when Sakamoto realized the blood wasn't clotting because it was special effects makeup. Suddenly, Kanaguri charged at Sakamoto with his clapperboard, hitting him in the side. Sakamoto, caught off guard, couldn't dodge in time. Kanaguri taunted that if Sakamoto made a movie, it would be boring. Who would want to watch a movie about fighting to the death where no one dies, he said. Sakamoto, severely hit, couldn't speak and fell to his knees. Kanaguri mockingly asked if it would be like 96 hours, wondering if Sakamoto could only be motivated if his child was in danger. While kneeling, Sakamoto silenced him, vowing to ensure Kanaguri would never shoot a film again. In his anger, Sakamoto managed to stand and kick Kanaguri that made him fly away. Kanaguri remarked that it was a better look for Sakamoto, adding that he had no interest in dying at the hands of the JAA. He declared that he would choose his own ending. Sakamoto was about to deliver the final blow when suddenly, someone intervened. It was Akira, who blocked Sakamoto's fist with a sword. Sakamoto was shocked, while Kanaguri couldn't believe what he saw and asked why. Akira said she would allow Kanaguri to film her story, which surprised both Sakamoto and Kanaguri. However, there was a condition. Because X killed his Aunt Ryan, Kanaguri should take her to X. Akira pointed her sword at Kanaguri, who was delighted by this revenge story plot. Sakamoto called out to Akira, but she had already run off, following Kanaguri. Suddenly, Shin jumped into the theater where Sakamoto was, calling out to him, and Sakamoto was surprised to see him there. Shin asked if he was okay, noticing his injuries, and it became apparent that Natsuki and Amine were with him. Natsuki asked what was happening, causing Akira to look back. Sakamoto said there was no time to explain. Shin then used his ability to read Akira's mind. He quickly ran and asked Seiba and Amine for help, saying they needed to stop Akira. Although they didn't understand why, they helped and attacked together. However, Shin saw Akira's killing path towards the three of them. Akira gave them a menacing look and managed to hit all three, sending them flying. Shin was shocked by Akira's ability, realizing that if he hadn't read the future, he might have been taken out. Sakamoto said it would be too dangerous for Akira to go alone, so he volunteered to accompany her to X. From above, Akira apologized, saying his insistence on not killing would only hinder her plan. She added that she would avenge her Aunt Ryan's death no matter what, determined to kill X. Akira then walked out through the hole in the wall with Kanaguri. The four were left behind, with Sakamoto worried about Akira. Several days have passed since the attack on JCC and Akira's departure from their school. The students, teachers, and staff of JCC gathered to mourn the loss of those who perished. Due to the death of 12 teachers and one missing student, the school was temporarily closed for a few days. The injured were treated and damaged facilities were repaired. Funerals were held for the deceased teachers. Because of what happened, the students realized that their idolization of X was misguided. During the funeral, Sakamoto noticed Amine and told him not to be too upset about what happened. He said that the enemy would have attacked JCC sooner or later, regardless of the circumstances. He advised Amine not to take responsibility for the incident, as they would certainly have found a way to infiltrate the school. Amine looked at him and asked if he was Sakamoto, as his appearance was different from when he first met him. Sakamoto didn't respond. Byodo suddenly spoke up, saying that the silver lining in all of this was Sakamoto's presence. He thanked Sakamoto for saving JCC, but Sakamoto replied that they were just lucky. Byodo was then curious about why Sakamoto was looking for X or Yuzuki. Shin looked on, waiting to see if Sakamoto would answer. Sakamoto said that he had quit being an assassin and was living a simple life with his family. However, he thought about the price on his head and X's threat to his child. So, he answered that his past was putting his family in danger, and therefore, it was his duty as a father to act. Furthermore, he couldn't just leave Akira behind after what had happened. Natsuki interjected in the conversation, reminding them not to forget about his brother, to which Shin responded that they hadn't forgotten about him. Because of this, Byodo told Sakamoto to come with him, and he would provide all the information he had about Yuzuki. They went to the staff room where Byodo sharpened a pencil. Byodo explained that each student had a personal file containing their grades, and that's where they would start. Shin couldn't believe that X's personal file was still there. Byodo thought for a moment and said that Yuzuki had taken the original file when he left the academy, but he had seen it once before. So, he recalled it and began writing on paper extremely quickly. Everyone was amazed by what he did. He managed to recreate the file he had seen and said that Yuzuki grew up in the JAA orphanage. At the age of 14, he passed the entrance exam there and enrolled in JCC. His initial score was high, but after that, he became an average student with no notable accomplishments. He eventually dropped out in his 4th year, just before graduation. Shin couldn't believe that Byodo had even drawn the ID picture from the file. Natsuki added that he was too distracted by Byodo's skills to process all that information. But Byodo mentioned that he didn't like doing this because it gave him tendinitis. Shin was puzzled, thinking that X was an exceptional assassin, but Sakamoto replied that even when they were students, he hardly ever spoke to him. Byodo added that X was quiet at school and hesitant to kill. After leaving JCC, there were rumors that he had died in an incident, and so Sakamoto and Shin were surprised by this story. However, Byodo said he had seen X just a few years ago. Shin was shocked and asked where he had seen him. Byodo recounted that he was returning from his chiropractor when he suddenly noticed Yuzuki crossing the street, so he called out to him. At first glance, it looked like Yuzuki, but the vibe of his posture, walk, and demeanor were completely different from before. Sakamoto and the others paused upon hearing this. Shin pondered this, noting that posture, walk, and other traits change over time. But Sakamoto mentioned that Byodo had recognized him immediately despite his disguise when he entered, because it's not easy to hide how a person uses their muscles or breathes. Natsuki suggested that X might have a split personality. Shin paused as he remembered being asked earlier how many people he heard, and he had answered that he heard 2 voices. This rang a bell for Shin. Byodo added that when he heard that X was Yuzuki, he was troubled because he couldn't understand how such a quiet child like Yuzuki could be responsible for such severe terrorism. Therefore, his guess was that there was another persona within him that was committing these evil acts. Once again, Sakamoto and the others paused due to the information they were gathering. Natsuki explained that there are cases where split personality or dissociative identity disorder develops based on a person's experiences or trauma they encountered as a child. He said this happens when a person creates a separate personality to escape unbearable pain. Because of this, he looked at Yuzuki's file and suggested they should get information from the orphanage where he grew up. Shin tried calling the orphanage's number, but it was no longer in service. Natsuki took out his phone and said if JAA was running it, they should ask them directly. A staff member answered, confirming that JAA did run that orphanage. However, it had ceased operations the year the orphanage was attacked and burned down. Due to this incident, the orphanage became empty. Natsuki thought that X might have gotten there first. Amine then noticed his grandfather drawing again and asked what he was doing. Byodo replied that he was recreating the newspaper from the day the orphanage was attacked. He explained that he reads the newspaper every day, and there might have been an article about it. When they read Byodo's recreation, Shin noticed details about the arson attack on the orphanage facility. According to the news, 32 people died in that attack. However, Shin and Sakamoto were puzzled by what they saw. The headline stated that 5 students and 1 teacher were missing. Due to the disappearance of these individuals after the attack, JAA was investigating the students' connection to an armed group. Sakamoto mentioned that Gaku and Yuta were with X when they attacked the JAA Tokyo HQ, which shocked Natsuki. He asked if they were collaborating with X and thought about his brother Mafuyu. Shin, unable to remain calm, observed the newspaper drawing carefully. The scene shifts to what appears to be a warehouse, where someone angrily declares that they will pay for this. It's Carolina Reaper, who is furious because JAA has kidnapped his younger brother, Club Jam. As he knelt down to the ground, Toramaru was disgusted, saying that Carolina Reaper is so big but crying like a brat. Kashima remarks that Carolina Reaper's crying won't change anything, but Carolina Reaper can't stop sobbing, certain that JAA will torture his brother. He imagines they might remove his nails, cut off his fingers, or crush his eggplant, although he adds that his brother might enjoy that. But when he thinks about someone other than himself torturing his brother, it's too painful for him to bear, so he can't help but cry. On the side, Toramaru comments that there are many types of siblings, while Mafuyu says this is creepy. Meanwhile, Kanaguri isn't answering Kashima's calls, leading him to think their plan is ruined. He blames Sakamoto, saying that disaster was because of him and that Sakamoto ruined their plan. Someone then tells him not to let it get him down. It was X who added that sometimes you need to distance yourself when you know something is a failure. He adds that he has good news for Gaku. He announces that Kumanomi and Haruma are returning. When asked when, he replies that the two will arrive in Bangkok on the weekend. Kashima wonders who they are, when suddenly Gaku slams his weapon on the floor. If they're coming, Gaku asks if it's okay for him to sleep first. Toramaru and the others are puzzled by this, and Kashima asks X who he mentioned. Gaku answers that they're his friends, adding that it's been a while since they've all been together. He says it looks like they'll all enjoy themselves, and X responds that to crush JAA, it's impossible to avoid enjoying themselves. They'll take down the members of the Order one by one. Gaku is curious about who will kill Takamura, whom he calls an old fart, and X and Kashima look at him. But he answers that it doesn't look like it will happen.